facilitator's guide to decision making and a consensus handbook. So yeah, we're all in the same boat here. Anyway, all right. It looks like we've got 14 attendees and a quorum. So I think we could probably open at least the roll call up, and then we can go to our staff update.
Okay, I will take roll. Gregory Braille.
I'm here. I gotta find the unmute. Yeah, I'm here.
Phil Burton.
Here.
Tony Carrasco.
Here.
In-Young Cho.
Here.
Larry Klein.
Here.
Nadia Nayak.
Here.
Keith Reckdahl.
Not here.
Not here at the moment. Dave Shen.
Here.
Carrie Templeton.
Here.
Okay.
Great, awesome. So I think first we have staff updates. Staff, I don't know what you have for us, but I'd love to hear more about how the town hall is going.
Okay. Do you want me to go ahead?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So I just want to mention that last week we recorded a question and answer session on YouTube Live. And that session was regarding Churchill, and you can find that if you enter the virtual town hall, vrpaloalto.com. If you enter the town hall, that you can find that link on the left. And tomorrow we'll be doing one for Charleston Meadow. And really just want to share that we've gotten really very good response so far. I think earlier today when we checked, we had over 400 visitors. Unique visitors, not the same visitors 400 times, but unique visitors, which is a pretty good amount. And we hope more people will visit. And tomorrow we'll be recording questions and answers to feedback that we received from Charleston Meadow. And so we're looking forward to really wide participation. And thank you to everyone who has participated so far. And once again, if you haven't, the website is vrpaloalto.com. And you can also find the link to that through connectingpaloalto.com.
Thank you. I just want to acknowledge that Keith just connected as well. So Philip, can you give us a sense of how many people attended the Q&A and kind of what was the general tenor of the questions? I mean, is any of it helpful for today's discussions that we should know about?
Yeah, so, well, there was a wide, sorry, I went on mute. There was a wide range of questions ranging from general type of questions to, specific questions about the alternative or the alternatives at Churchill. It's hard to say the attendees, but when I checked earlier, there'd been 116 views of the session. And I think we had, I'll have to go back and look and see how many questions. Maybe I can pull this up.
16 questions total.
Yeah,
Okay.
16 questions. I do have to share that we've had quite a jump in the number of people that have visited since we recorded. So
Okay.
I think probably the visitors have more than doubled since we recorded. So it's been a big
You mean
jump.
the visitors to the Q&A of the YouTube or to the VR site?
No, to the virtual town hall.
Okay, cool.
So we've, for the town hall that we're working on for the YouTube live session that we'll be recording tomorrow, we've received, I think, about double the questions that we received for Churchill.
Okay.
Yeah, but we'll continue to collect all of the questions that we receive, and we'll provide a FAQ on the website, and we will provide a download of all the information that we collect.
Great.
And I'd like to add that all the questions that were asked through the first YouTube session are added onto the Connecting Palo Alto website. So if anyone is interested to look at, rather than going through the YouTube video, they're also added onto Connecting Palo Alto frequently asked questions website location.
Great. Ex-cappers, do you have any questions for staff?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Tony.
Just wondering if you have the data for the location diversity of these questions, or these over 100 people. Do you know where these questions are coming from? Just wondering if they're spread around Palo Alto or they're focused in one area.
Yeah, so one of the things that we share, or the information that we have shared and we will be able to continue to share, is which neighborhoods people are providing their feedback from or they live in. Yeah. And also one of the interesting things is when we really went in and we were looking at people's IP addresses, we were seeing that, you know, somebody was recording a comment from or was visiting from Beijing, for instance, and we wondered, are they really in Beijing, or is that a VPN, or who knows? But at any rate,
I'm going to guess, Philip, that it could be somebody's ISP
yeah, it's likely a VPN that,
or a VPN, something like that.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. By the way, let me just observe, since I do have some background in this area, that IP addresses are often linked, at least in Palo Alto, are linked to addresses outside Palo Alto, just because of the way the ISP has actually structured their physical network.
Right.
So,
one of the questions that we've asked people to provide is what neighborhood they live in.
yeah.
So that's actually, we have, you know, the actual data that people are providing us if they take the time to provide feedback. I was talking about when we actually looked at the IP addresses to kind of track.
Yeah, no, I understand that, but I just think that actual answers are far better indicator than IPs would be.
Yeah. I was just kind of sharing that as an interesting point of data, but yeah, I think you're absolutely correct. And what we share in the chart is not the IP addresses location, because that's not really indicative of where somebody is.
Yeah, like Sonic, for example, was based, I think, in Santa Rosa. How many people will be calling in from Santa Rosa to respond? That's just one example.
Anybody else have any questions about the virtual town hall that they wanted answered?
Yeah, actually, I do have one more question. Aside from one comment that I've seen about the inability to do sticky notes, have you gotten any other feedback from people who say, well, you know, I couldn't really point to something specific?
Not that I've heard. I haven't seen any comments about that. I think the one comment that we heard about sticky notes was from somebody that hadn't yet seen the tutorial and didn't understand that they could leave feedback on each specific alternative. And we reached out to that individual directly and helped them with that.
All right.
Since then, we haven't heard anything else.
So I guess my question is anyone doing any kind of tallying or sentiment analysis or anything from what the public is telling us? And at what point do we want to have that information, or are we assuming we're going to have that go straight to the council?
So we shared it in our YouTube live. We shared information about what we had received for Churchill, and we'll be doing the same for Charleston Meadow tomorrow. So we'll be sharing the sentiment that we've, you know, for each different alternative that we've heard so far. Note, those are snapshots in time, so we'll have to also do it again following the end of the town hall, share the information that we receive in total. But as of right now, we've shared Churchill last week, and we'll be sharing Charleston Meadow tomorrow. Okay,
because I didn't attend that, and now I'm looking at the agenda to see if I have that information.
So it's again, if you go to the virtual Palo Alto room, the vrpaloalto.com, it's on the left side of the room, and it's the session there. And I think it's the beginning of the slides. We kind of go through the statistics of the demographics and the response that we received.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, Tony, oh, you took your hand down. Okay, anybody else? Okay. All right, seeing nobody, and we're going to move. Oh yeah, go ahead.
One more thing. We'll be posting the PowerPoint from that as well. So that PowerPoint will contain that data as well.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, so we'll move now to oral communications. This is a reminder that this is for items that are not on the agenda. So please do not tell us your suggestions for Churchill or kind of mention our deliberations. You can talk about other things. And I lost my participants window that tells me how many hands we have up, so I can figure out how much time everybody gets. Okay, it looks like there's 3. Okay, great. So I think we can do 2 minutes for this section, and I'll let Jose take it away.
Okay, so we have 4 people with their raised hand. The first speaker is Steve Carlson, followed by Carrie Wagner. I'm gonna allow you to talk here. Please unmute yourselves.
Sorry, I'm having a technical problem, so please come back to me in a second.
Sure, just a sec. All right, I'm gonna allow Carrie Wagner to talk.
Thank you. I watched the virtual town hall. I thought it was really well done, especially the animations with narration that really helped make a lot of these options clearer. So I do have a comment on Charleston Rastradero. One of the options, I think it was the underpass, specifically said that a construction would be happening simultaneously. And I just want you to be sure that we have, when construction is going on at Meadow and Charleston, that we have at least one road through for bikes and pedestrians and probably vehicles. Otherwise, there's no way from anyone east of Alma to get to Gunn, and there's no way for anybody west of Alma to get to Midtown or Piazzas, or anyway, just that's a comment. And then my next comment is it not specific to Churchill, but I noticed that for that construction, one of the things happening first is an underpass. And I think we can never have too many underpasses, but I noticed there are no underpasses planned for South Palo Alto. And that would be nice if that was the first thing that was done, because then we wouldn't have to worry about the Charleston Rastradero or Meadow being open. And at this point, we have 4 underpasses for North Palo Alto, and we have 0 for South Palo Alto. And after construction, we will have 5 for North Palo Alto and 0 for South Palo Alto. And I think that's unconscionable, and it's an equity issue. So thank you very much. I appreciate your work on this.
Thank you. Stephen, are you able to communicate now?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Steve Carlson from Southgate. My comments pertain to the traffic study from a couple sessions ago. The reason is that I sometimes hear members of the public and maybe even XCAP members say the traffic study shows that Churchill can be closed with mitigations which avoid creating traffic congestion for the community at large. I'd like to point out 2 important limitations of that statement. First, the Hexagon report actually shows that with closure and mitigations, 2 major intersections are impacted. El Camino in Oregon degrades to a level F and cannot be mitigated. El Camino in Embarcadero is also impacted, falling 4 seconds short of also being a level F. Both of these are negatively impacted compared with the current state. The second and even bigger issue, though, is the use of 2030 projections, which, as I understand it, include about 5% traffic growth for Palo Alto. Contrast that with Caltrain's own projections of 40% corridor growth in people and jobs by 2040. And yet we're using 5% traffic growth. Wouldn't you like to know what happens if at some point there is 10% growth, 15% growth? That could be modeled. If Churchill closure was completed by 2025, it would be on the basis of projections looking 5 years into the future. How far out should we be looking? Is it 2040? What about 2050, 2080? How far out should we be looking for a major infrastructure project such as this? Would you be willing to take the risk of eliminating a major east-west artery without data which shows it can be done safely without creating major traffic congestion and gridlock throughout the city for many years to come? XCAP members, you've seen the data. When you speak of the traffic study as it pertains to Churchill, please do so with transparency and in the context of these important limitations so that we can keep everybody on the same page. Thanks.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Rachel Kellerman, followed by Susan Newman. Rachel, if you can unmute yourself.
Great. Good afternoon, everyone. My comment is on the video recorded Churchill Town Hall. I was disappointed that the Town Hall for Churchill Crossing was not interactive. We could not ask follow-up questions and engage with the hardworking experts as we had in previous town halls. Since the pandemic, the public has not been able to talk personally to experts from either city staff or AECOM. This was a missed opportunity and frankly frustrating. Also, the choices for Churchill in the town hall exclude an option that was presented to council in 2018, the no build with safety upgrades. Philip addressed this question in the video recorded town hall. He said no build is always addressed in the environmental impact report. Well, despite the city and XCAP's efforts to engage the community, the public and important stakeholders are still not focused on the rail crossing agenda, let alone the details of an environmental impact report process. Not including the no-build safety upgrade option in the virtual town hall does not give the public an accurate view of the choices currently available for this crossing. Thank you all for the hard work you are doing during this difficult time.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Susan. You can unmute yourself.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, good. I'm using earphones for the first time, so I wasn't quite sure how that worked. I had a slightly related comment to Rachel's. I am concerned about the XCAP and City Council taking whatever opinions and concerns were expressed in the Q&A too seriously without understanding more about how outreach was done. I know that for us in Southgate, I was aware that it was coming up. I kind of lost track of the time, and before I knew it, the town hall had been up for 5 days or something like that, and there was very little time to promote the question and answer session before it was upon us. So I just want to say, be a little careful about how you read whatever is there. You'll have the numbers and that'll help, but I really feel like we weren't able to promote it as seriously as we would have liked to. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. That concludes our speakers.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, so the next item is the draft of the update that I wrote for City Council. I think we have, if staff was just telling me that we were supposed to go to City Council on September 14th. I believe that date has moved. Philip, you can confirm it's the 28th, I believe you said?
Yes, confirming the 28th.
Okay, so question about do I need to bring this item back so that we have the most updated update for City Council? In other words, should XCAP review what I've written now and then we have to do that again closer to the 28th? Or can I send out an addendum afterwards and then we can just discuss the addendum at a future meeting? Any suggestions?
Yeah, Nadia, I think similar to previously what you did on May 18th, if there was any changes, you can bring it back to the XCAP and, state any changes that you would like to include in the report.
Okay. Great, that works. So XCAPers, did you get a chance to read it? And if so, thoughts, suggestions, how'd you like it?
Yeah,
Anybody? Thanks,
okay.
Phil, go for it.
I thought it was very well written, Nadia, but I have a concern about the 28th because the 28th is Yom Kippur.
Okay, so that's the date of the City Council meeting.
Yes, I know. And super theoretically, Yom Kippur's over at sundown, but effectively, I can't attend, and maybe some other members of the public can't attend virtually.
Okay. Thank you for that. Is there anybody? Tony, I saw your hand go up. Yep.
I second what Phil just said. I thought it was also very well written. And I liked it because it also captured not only the local, but the big picture and how it affects us. And so I think it was very comprehensive.
Thank you. Is there anyone who didn't get a chance to read it? And it's okay to confess that now, because now it turns out we have time. Because I did want to draw some attention to some sections that I wanted to be sure you guys were okay with. So if it's okay to raise your hand if you didn't get a chance to fully read it.
I've been reading it for the last few minutes.
Okay.
The wonder of virtual meetings.
I have a comment or a question.
Thanks, Keith. Yeah.
You highlight the fact that the business community hasn't been involved and PAUSD has not been involved. Is that going to be rectified in the near future, or are we just proceeding without them? I don't know if that's a question for staff.
Yeah, probably more for staff.
I'm sorry, Keith, could you repeat that question?
In Nadia's write-up, she correctly assesses that the business community has not been involved and PAUSD is not involved in our investigation deliberations. Are we going to have any input from those groups, or are we just proceeding ignoring their concerns right now?
Well, first off, I don't know if it's accurate to say that they haven't been involved. With respect to, I believe it was the Chamber of Commerce, they specifically, Judy declined and step off of the XCAP some time ago. With respect to PAUSD, again, that was their decision to step off of the XCAP. And also Philip made a presentation to the City School Liaison Committee. Was it just last week or somewhere thereabouts?
Yeah, I mean, I sat in that presentation, and the PAUSD, they had no idea what was going on. They were not engaged with the process. And so, well, I mean, if they don't know what's going on, it's hard to judge whether they're making a correct assumption or assessment of their impacts.
Well, we specifically asked whether they wanted to have the presentation go to the school district board, and the response was they would get back to us. And so I think the level of engagement of the district, perhaps distinct from parents, and you know, to the extent that there's a distinction worth drawing there, we should explore it. But with the district formally, I'm not sure we're going to get much more than what we have received. And then with respect to the business community, we have, and in fact, through the town hall, really been trying to push the town hall as a means for them to get engaged in whatever manner they'd like to, and have had some feedback as to, okay, they'll push it out to others, but that's basically been the nature of the response. And feel free to.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, yeah, on the same note to that, you know, we've reached out to the Stanford Research Park, you know, trying to get the people that are commuting there to get involved, and also through not just the schools, not just also through the superintendent, and also through our Safe Routes to School and Jose, who's helping us to mute and unmute and speakers tonight. He's our Safe Routes to School staff. He helped us with reaching out through the Safe Routes to School team.
So is that the same as the City School Transportation Safety Committee?
Well, the Safe Routes to School staffs that committee. Yes, okay. But the people that are on that, you know, are the people that are being reached out to. So, but
did you give them a presentation, or will you, and might they make more formal comments? I mean, I can understand why maybe the school district, the board of the school may not have very specific comments, but from a technical perspective, it would be great to be able to at least get feedback specifically on bike ped plans from the Safe Routes to School folks. And so I'm just wondering if there's I understand it may not come in time for our deliberations, but just to be able to get that overall would be excellent.
Sure. Yeah, so I have gone to them in the past, not recently. And I know that They are not meeting again until October, early October. But I was planning to go back to them as well.
Okay. And I just wanted to make clear that my report actually says that we just haven't received any public comment specifically from the business community. So even, since Judy left, there just hasn't been anybody who during public comment has identified themselves as a business owner and come and said something. Not that we have not all attempted to reach the business community. And obviously I'd like to acknowledge that we are in the middle of a pandemic and a financial crisis. Understandable that our businesses and our schools are probably a bit busy trying to focus on their own operations, and it's kind of a hard time to get them to give feedback on a bike pen plan for a project that may take a while longer than we thought. So we get that. So the one thing I wanted to make sure that ex-cappers were okay with is the way that we've had a lot of back and forth about the amount of bike ped details that we have for the new alternatives. And what I tried to do in this report is explain that from the staff and the consultants' perspective, the way this is usually done for the kind of the standard alternatives, or let's call them the original alternatives, because none of, except for in a closure situation of Churchill, all modes, cars, bikes, and pedestrians essentially are treated the same, that they're not accustomed to going to great levels of detail in the analysis at that phase. But that given that the new alternatives that came from the community suggestions are much more focused on the bike ped stuff, it requires a level of detail, or the committee and the community seem to be seeking a level of detail that doesn't seem to be quite possible given our fiscal situation and our time. And, I just wanted to make sure that everyone was okay with stating it that way, and that kind of adequately explains what the situation is.
Yeah, I'm actually trying to find the part in the report where you say that, because I think that is really important, that we make it clear that, we are not going to decide, the height of the curb cuts and the texture of the concrete.
Yep. Give me 1 second. Let me find. Hold on, there's the Sebastian
And I'm
section.
sounding facetious, but I mean, really, I think that our role is at a much higher level based on the amount of engineering analysis it is realistic to do now. This is the alternative for the alternatives we think make the most sense.
Yeah, so I think it's the second paragraph under bike pedestrian outreach. So it says, as noted in the viaduct, hybrid, trench,
Oh, I
and
see.
tunnel.
Okay, yeah.
It's not usually analyzed in great detail at this stage. The new alternatives attempt to provide greater design flexibility and thus involve more complex bike ped designs. Palo Alto has made a commitment to treat all modes equally in their planning efforts, but XCAP has run into some difficulty because yada yada.
Yeah, I see that part. I feel like that statement applies to more than just bike ped.
Probably,
maybe
but
bike ped is important, but yeah.
Yeah, I think that's where we're getting the most concerns about, hey, we don't know enough how the bikes would turn or what would happen, right? So I wanted to call that out there.
Yeah, I'd like to say, that being said, it's a certain minimum that has to be done to, if nothing else, assess the costs.
Yeah, exactly. Well, understanding we have very ballpark numbers right now. I also did want to say, I recognize that the section that I put in there of Sebastian Petty of Caltrain's presentation is long. My intention was that knowing how hard it is for city council members at this time, they probably are not going to be able to go back and read the full original statement that Sebastian made. And so I attempted my best to kind of put those into kind of policy buckets for them. So cliff notes, if you will, of the presentation. So those of us who remember what cliff notes are, now it's schmoop or something, at least my daughter tells me.
Executive summary.
Thank you, executive summary. Sounds better than cliff notes. Thank you, Carrie.
TLDR? No, sorry.
Okay, I have to take public comment on this item. So if you're a member of the public who has read my update to City Council and would like to comment at this time, if you could digitally raise your hand, that would be excellent. I'll give you guys a minute to find the buttons. Okay, it seems like everyone's okay. So depending on whatever happens in our next few sessions before, I got staff is letting me know that in order to get this into the packet, Sarah, when did you say it is? It's September 17th is my packet date. So if there's any big milestones that XCAP reaches between now and the 17th, I'd be able to give an update to XCAP and or give an update to City Council about what else has transpired. So just wanted to acknowledge that we can do that. meaning if we come to some big decision today, I can report that out. Or not if the committee wants to wait. We can decide that at the next meeting, we'll have time to do that. So, okay, well, I don't see any public comment on that issue. So that brings us to updates on the working groups. Larry, did you want to, is there anything you wanted to say about the, where did Larry go? Did I lose Larry? I didn't see him on my screen. Does anyone else see Larry? No, we have lost Larry. Okay. Greg, I know you were waiting on comments back. I think Larry sent you some edits. Oh, here comes Larry.
I have his edits. Thank you. I will look at them sometime this week.
Okay, awesome. Larry, we know you lost you there for a second right when I was coming to ask you something. I wanted to know if there was anything that you wanted to say about the chapters we've received so far. I just confirmed with Greg that he did see your edits. And so anything else you want to say about the working group updates for right now? Oh, I think Larry froze. Okay.
Sorry, I totally disappeared from the screen, so I left the meeting and came back on.
Okay.
No, I don't have anything. We're moving along.
Oh, Larry, we're losing you. Try again. Now I can see you.
Nothing to add.
Okay, great. Okay. So with that, we will move to continuing our deliberations on Churchill. Before we begin, we did take public comment last week. We are going to allow anybody who missed the opportunity, who we didn't hear from last week during this item. If there's somebody who did not get a chance to speak last week and would like to speak before we begin now, you'll raise your hand. We do have a list of everyone who spoke last week, so please do your best to be honest and work on the honor system. And so we're really only taking comment from someone who wasn't able to make it to last week's meeting and would like a chance to speak now. So it looks like I've got 2 people. And so those 2 folks can have 3 minutes, Jose.
Okay.
And it will just be Tom Kellerman and Neva Yarkin. And they did not speak last week, correct?
Correct. I have the list here.
Perfect.
All right.
Thanks, guys.
All right, Tom, I'm going to allow you to talk. If you can unmute yourself.
Okay, thank you. So I have comments related to the preparation of the XCAP report to the City Council. As you're aware, the proposed mitigations associated with the Churchill closing proposal are expressly designated as conceptual by Hexagon in their final traffic report. In addition, in 2018, the City Council adopted a resolution that specifically requires that any Churchill closure include mitigations that address redirecting traffic into adjacent residential streets. Hexagon has informed the XCAP that their conceptual mitigation proposal focused solely on level of service, so other factors will still need to be taken into consideration before a final solution is approved. So it's important that the XCAP report clearly informs the City Council of which factors are incorporated in the recommended actions and which factors have not been addressed. So we recommend that as part of its report, the XCAP adopt an approach that incorporates a few elements as follows. So first, we'd suggest studying a seal bike ped tunnel as an alternative to the Churchill bike ped tunnel. This alternative has been discussed several times, but it's never been studied. It would be safer than a crossing at an intersection with a traffic light, which is what's proposed for Churchill, as there'd be less car traffic on Seal. So it seems like that's something, it won't be done by the time you make your recommendations, but it would be something to suggest in your report that be studied. Secondly, redesign and implement the Kingsley Embarcadero bike ped pathway that was previously designed in 2016. Given the high volume of bicycle and pedestrian traffic on the north side of Embarcadero and the significant increases in vehicular traffic on this corridor that would result from the proposed Churchill closure, additional safety measures will be essential on this pathway. So these improvements, when added to the proposed bike ped overpass on the west side of the tracks, would not only improve bike ped safety, but also improve LOS on Embarcadero Road for car traffic. So again, that's something that won't be able to be studied or fully implemented in your current recommendations, but I think it's something that the City Council should be aware ought to be further studied before final resolutions are adopted. And then finally, for now, we would recommend adopting the CAN or no build safety upgrades option that was proposed to the council in 2018. If a bike ped tunnel is constructed at Seal, for example, then closing Churchill becomes a fairly easy exercise because you wouldn't have to then build another bike tunnel. And if the city decided to do that when there was increased train service, it would not be a very large project. Delaying a decision on closure of Churchill would allow the city until, including the Planning and Transportation Commission after the end of the XCAP, to carefully study and adopt a more comprehensive solution in accordance with the requirements adopted by the City Council. So those are our recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Neva Yarbin. If you can unmute yourself, please.
I'm Neva Yarkin, and I live on Churchill Avenue. The three options left for Churchill Crossing are Churchill closure with mitigation, viaduct, and partial underpass. In my opinion, the viaduct is really not worth talking about because of the impact to people's backyards and the $400 million price tag. Money will be hard to come by since Palo Alto has a deficit of $40 million and the business community has their hands full trying to keep businesses from closing. Caltrains has no money for grade separations either. The partial underpass option could take partial property acquisitions on Alma and also could take partial properties across from the Pally track on Churchill. On Kellogg Avenue, properties will lose street parking. Also, if the Castellet expansion is approved, there will be more traffic on Kellogg from cars and bikers, which will change the whole dynamics of the partial underpass option. I think the right-of-way by Caltrans should be included in the final report. Caltrans is reluctant to consider giving the city any of their rights to their right-of-way. This could jeopardize the partial underpass option. Partial underpass would cost $200 million. I'm against property acquisitions or eminent domain, and I'm very concerned for the safety of the hundreds of biker riders going to Pally in the morning on Churchill. The cheapest option would be Churchill closure around $65 million. For these reasons, I think that Churchill closure with mitigations is the best solution. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I don't know if there's any more comments, but that's it so far.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Oh, we have one more here from Eric MC.
Okay.
Let's double check that. Yeah, I don't see that on the list.
Okay.
Go ahead, Eric.
I just want to say, and that'll be our last speaker.
And if you can unmute yourself, Eric.
Okay. I just wanted to my only question is in the XCAP report, if you could please include in regards to the partial underpass, an option where the bike underpass part of the partial underpass is constructed without the actual remainder of the project, which could potentially be done at a later time when Caltrain is better understood. But it sounds like I'm a neighbor in the Southgate neighborhood that the bike underpass part of the partial underpass is a quite popular option, and it might be able to be separated from the rest of the project. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that's it.
Okay. All right, so last week we kind of went through the pros and the cons of all of the alternatives, at least two for each. We didn't go through all of them. And by my tally, and I did do a write-up of it if you guys want to see it, but by my tally, it seems like there's more general support for two of the alternatives and less for one. And to state the obvious, I think I didn't hear as much support for the viaduct. There were a lot less pros that people were able to come up with for the viaduct. And so I wanted to take a moment and see if there's anybody who feels very strongly that the viaduct should absolutely be the only alternative that we're trying to pursue, or, and I'll just leave it there. Is there anybody who would like to sort of raise their hand on that alternative, or do we want to focus our attention on instead the partial underpass and the closure plus mitigations? Tony, yeah, go ahead, you can speak.
So I think at this stage of the design process, I think we've got a lot of information that we didn't have when we started the options. I also think the three options that we've studied encompass all of the different various ways of doing this. And there are several good things and bad things in each of them. And it might be at this process in science or in design, we look at the possibility of other ways to do it. For instance, if we don't know what the configuration is going to be on the north side of Embarcadero. If it is a viaduct,
Tony? Oh no, we lost Tony.
assume it's a viaduct. Sorry.
Tony, you cut out there for a minute. So you just said if it's a viaduct, and then I think that's when we lost you. So
Sorry.
please continue. Yep.
If it's a viaduct, then the cost of going up and down is eliminated. The down costs are eliminated. In other words, the viaduct will only cost around half as much as is proposed, going just over Churchill and trying to come down at 1.6% before Embarcadero. Another issue is that Embarcadero needs to get updated in the next 30 years or so. And removing that constraint of a high-speed rail, or I mean a Caltrain or high-speed rail line there will be very difficult in the future. So I think we have to remove that constraint. It's unlikely that we don't do that. That said, I think we should look at the viaduct in more detail. And there may be alternatives to the viaduct exactly allowing bikes and peds and cars at Churchill. Maybe you look at bikes and peds and move cars in a different way, but you could do a Homer-like underpass there, which is a really pleasant underpass, which the Planning Commission worked hard on and the Architectural Review Board worked hard on. So there are options, and I think I would suggest that we recommend to City Council that we really need to study 2 or 3 of these in more detail. In other words, in more, where does the landscaping go? Where do bikes and peds go? How easy is it? Mm-hmm. So that's my suggestion to our group, to XCAP, to look at these 3 or 2 options in a bit more detail and see if we can add some benefits from one to the other.
Okay, is it, I want to make sure that I'm hearing you. Are you proposing that the viaduct wouldn't necessarily be the only option, that you feel more comfortable recommending 2 or more? That's what I'm hearing you say. And the viaduct would be one of those for you.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Is there anybody else who, with Tony, really feels strongly? Let's say that if we were pushing 2 alternatives right now, that viaduct would be one of the alternatives that would be on your list as well.
I don't know if I would say strongly. I think I can't get past the cost of the viaduct and
Okay.
the fact that it's significantly more than even the partial underpass. If it weren't for the cost, I think I probably would say I strongly prefer the viaduct over the partial underpass, but I don't see how we pay for it.
Okay, but if we had to pick 2, would that be among your 2? Based on how it is right now, knowing what we know now?
I'd have to say no, just because of the unrealistic cost.
Okay. I saw a hand go up. Carrie, and then Larry, I saw your hand.
Quickly, I at the level we've evaluated it so far, I'm agreeing with Greg. I think it would be hard to put that in my top 2. I do want to make sure we record the pros and cons, and I had just to share, we talked a little bit about this. I see where you're going. You want us to spend our time focused on the top 2 options. So I'm comfortable with that, but I do understand where Tony's coming from to be able to describe why or why not that third option when we send it in.
Yep.
So maybe you could talk a little bit about your vision on how that will be captured.
Sure. So I think we had said earlier on that even if we decide not to pursue any alternatives, we always have the possibility that we make recommendations to council and they don't agree with us and they pick something else. So it's incumbent upon us to capture the 2 years worth of work and really dump as much institutional knowledge into the report so that we can say, look, we didn't, for example, maybe pick a viaduct, but if you were going to go with the viaduct, here are all the good things and bad things you should know. And here are some ideas on how you might study it further. And here are some considerations you maybe should have thought of. And the one proposal I would certainly favor strongly, and maybe if there's support to remove discussing the viaduct, but that we can all agree should be a strong message to send back to council, is how the group feels about the fact that Churchill was divided off of the discussion from Palo Alto Avenue and how we sort of feel about that. And so this would be a good place for us to talk about the fact that those two seemed pretty linked for most of us throughout our discussions.
Yeah, Nadia, I want to draw.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Draw a distinction between the tunnels, which we are rejecting for obvious, clear, obvious reasons, and the viaduct, in which case the decision is less striking.
Okay, good point. Larry, I saw your hand.
Yes, I think we need to come up with cleaner, more cogent recommendations to council. So I have, while I have no trouble discussing the two so-called finalists, I hope that we will come up with one recommendation to the council and discussion of the others as to the lines that you just mentioned, Nadia. But I think that the city, our citizens do expect us as the people who've spent more time on this than anybody else, that we will have a recommendation for each site if at all possible. So to move the discussion along, I think that we should eliminate the viaduct for the reasons that the other people have stated. And so I will move that and hope we'll get a second and further discussion. That is that we reject the idea of recommending the viaduct in the same manner that we rejected the tunnels in South Palo Alto.
Okay. Is there a second to the way Larry has phrased what he said? Okay, so can I take a guess? I think, Larry, where you may be losing folks is to state it that it's you're as opposed as we were to the tunnels, because I think everyone is pretty firm on the tunnels. I think the concern about the viaduct is with the information we have right now, we just can't necessarily come to a strong conclusion. Group, did I get that right? Or if you disagree with what Larry said?
I'm, as you'll hear on throughout this, the information we have is the information we have. And I think it's appropriate for the level that we're operating under. And that's true for all of the three sites. No, I just think that we have to, that the opposition to the viaduct may not be as strong as it was to the tunnels. Doesn't make any difference to me. It's the idea that we're supposed to make a recommendation, and at some point we start having to narrow the field, and I'm ready to narrow the field by saying no to the viaduct right now.
Okay, I see Tony and then Carrie.
So just to clarify my idea, I don't think there should be a viaduct from the backyards of Mariposa, but I think there can be a better closure option than the one that we have.
Okay, Carrie?
As unlikely as it is that money would fall from the sky, is money the only reason that we are planning to reject the viaduct? And I just want to make sure I understand that.
I mean, I will say this is not supposed to be a popularity contest. The viaduct seems to be uniquely unpopular among people who come and speak to us. And there have been a few brave viaduct proponents, and I have noticed them. And when we get to South Palo Alto, this discussion is going to be even more fun. But I have to say it is uniquely unpopular, and I think we would have to have a very, very good reason to recommend that the council pick a viaduct over the other alternatives given that. And I can't come up with a very, very good reason that costs $400 million.
Right.
Even if it were $300 million.
Yeah.
So it sounds like we're leaning to the direction Nadia and Larry are suggesting.
Right. And I did want to say, I hear what you're saying, Tony, but what I'm hearing you say now that I'm a little more nuanced is you'd be more in favor of the viaduct, but your version of the viaduct, not the one we've been looking at, and that your version is really tied to what's happening in the north, which you have my sympathies, but unfortunately that part of the process has been cut off to us. So I guess what I wanted to ask is, would the group be comfortable doing what Larry said, which is to remove the viaduct from consideration, but to ensure that we put into our report, and we can come back to exactly what we're going to write for each section, because that'll be part of our editing of the reports, to make it really clear that, should there be a viaduct selected for North Palo Alto, that the council may have to sort of consider where would it go down near Embarcadero, and how that might have any kind of interplay on whatever gets suggested for Churchill. Would that satisfy what you were trying to say, Tony?
Yes, it would.
Okay. Dave, I see your hand, and then I see Carrie again.
Yeah, just quickly, I guess we probably want to make some kind of notation saying that whatever decision we're making is really what just Larry said. It's like, this is what we've done up to this point, so this is all we can decide upon. Everything else is fuzzy into the future. And if everybody's clear on that, whether people like it or not, I don't know about that, but this is all we got, right? It's like, and based on what we have, we're going to make a decision based on what we got. And whatever comes after that is after us. And making that really, really clear, because otherwise people are always going to go, whoa, blah, 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 we could have done this, couldn't have. It's like, well, yes, but we had to vote, but this is all we could vote on. So.
Okay, so Larry, do you want to restate your motion? See if you get.
Sure. That we delete from our further consideration the alternative of the viaduct with the understanding, and this is true of all the alternatives, that we're going to have in our final report a discussion as to the pros and cons of each, so the council and our citizens have a full understanding of our reasoning. Period. End of.
Okay, Tony, yeah.
So I think that's reasonable, although I would add to that we accept that traffic is going to move from that intersection and be exported to other neighborhood streets, that we accept that condition is okay. And I'm not sure that it's okay. So I'm not sure I can vote for it yet. I think there are two alternatives, and I think there should be further study in any design process. I think we've come to a point where we looked at many options, and this happens in science too. We've looked at many options. We look at the failures and strengths of each option, and we see if there are others. And I don't think we've done that in the detail that we need to. And I think it could be an after the XCAP, a new committee maybe, or something else that looks at the stuff in more detail and is able to modify these options.
Okay, Carrie?
If I understand correctly, we still commit to, after this deliberation process, complete the column F and record our evaluation of the viaduct to justify why we deprecated it.
Yes.
Okay. In that case, my understanding is we're going to mark it as not recommended, and then I would second our vice chair's motion.
Yeah, and just to be clear, what Carrie's referring to is I had asked her earlier today, as we continue to discuss this, because it's hard for me to both see who's got their hand raised and also take notes, if she would help me to take notes inside the dynamic matrix that she made, because it's just an easier format to do it. So that's why Carrie's referring to column numbers and whatnot. And it's not to say that that's how we're making the decision, but that's where she's writing things down so that I can look at it afterwards, so that everyone is clear on what that is. And whatever Carrie ends up writing into the matrix, we will provide a copy to staff so it can be made public at the next meeting. So you all can see what notes are the notes that we made from this meeting and make sure that we got it right. So I just want to make that clear so people aren't confused.
Thank you.
Okay, so Larry, you have your second. Did you want to speak to your support for Larry's or?
I do. I think Tony's comments helped me crystallize my position. I do think that if we work with these other project ideas, we always could understand the viaduct in connection with North Palo Alto when and if that is ever discussed outside the scope of this project. So it helped me understand that it's completely outside the scope of this project at this point. So I feel comfortable removing it from consideration for the scope that we've been assigned.
Great. So part of what we committed to as part of this process is that as we're getting close to taking some of these votes, that we're making sure to check in if anybody has anything that they, are going to be forced to vote on something, but are still kind of holding back thoughts. Now would be a really good time to voice those. So if there's anybody who's still feeling like, well, I'm going to vote for this or I'm not, but here are my concerns, this would be a really great time to voice those. So if you have anything, now would be a good time to raise your hand, either digitally or otherwise. Keith, it's weird not being able to see you. Yes, In-Young, go ahead.
I think, moving, I feel like we should move forward. And if it's something is not popular, it's expensive and issues, maybe we can simplify. We can solve some problems by simplifying. And so, there are some problems with the current choices, but, if it's by eliminating viaduct is contributing to simplification, I think we should go ahead.
Okay. Anybody else before we take a vote? All right, seeing none, I will call names in alphabetical order. So Greg, do you support Larry's motion? I need a verbal.
Yes, I
Great.
I vote yes.
Phil?
Yes.
Tony?
Yes.
In-Young?
Yes.
Larry? You're voting yes on your own motion? Oh, I think Larry froze. Larry?
I think he's going to abstain.
Yes.
Okay, just checking. I was like, oh no, it froze again. I vote yes. Keith?
Yes.
Okay, Dave Shen?
Yes.
And Carrie?
Yes.
Okay, all right. So that is unanimous. And so yay for us, another movement. Okay, so now that leaves us with the two. So this is the part of the game where it gets fun, or not game, but the part of the thing where it gets fun. So what I really wanted to hear is, I know that Larry voiced his idea that he really feels like, we've been given a mission by council and our council is to have a single idea. And so we should push to get to that idea. And I would like to hear from the rest of the group whether you are strongly behind that concept or whether you think that that it's too difficult to choose between the two. And the reason I'm front loading that discussion is we could spend hours trying to attempt to figure out if that's where we are, or if we can just state it from the beginning, then we can spend the rest of the meeting trying to fill out what it is, or the pros and the cons and the sticking points and what else there might be. And we can kind of check in again at the end of the meeting. But I just figured that might make for shorter discussion. So Larry is firmly in the camp of we should have one answer. I will say that I'm firmly in the camp that I'm pretty split, because I feel like I have various reasons why, and I'm slightly favoring one over the other, but it's like a very narrow choice for me. Is there anybody who feels really passionately that, no, we have to have one answer? Or how do you guys feel about there being two? Tony?
I think we can now, from my perspective at least, look at just one answer.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else? Sorry, I'm trying to take notes. Carrie and then Phil.
I think we'll be delivering our report with context if they want to see what our stack rank is, but we should come up with a recommendation.
Okay, with a single recommendation. Okay.
I agree. I mean, if we end up a hung jury or whatever, we can come back to it. But I think that now I don't know if that means we're going to get a unanimous
Doubt it.
And maybe that will need to go into our recommendation, but I think that we should strive to come up with one answer, knowing perfectly well that there will be tremendous pressure on the council from all the same people who have been talking to us
Right.
to make a different decision.
Phil?
Yeah, I think we do need to come up with an answer to Larry's point, but I also think we need to provide council with, if you will, that list of pros and cons that we compiled last week, maybe augmented a little bit,
Yeah,
just
for
so
sure
they
we'll do that.
anticipate the kind of issues that they're going to hear, so they're not blindsided by something that we never heard from, so to speak.
Okay, Keith?
Yeah, I don't think we can. I don't think we have enough information to say a final answer, in the sense that closure is the simplest and the cheapest. There's a lot of good things about the closure, but the thing that closure doesn't have is neighborhood support. And I think if we're going to choose something that we don't have, that we're going against neighborhood support, we need to show the neighborhood that we did our best to make this work. And I don't think we've done that for the underpass. In particular, the Caltrain right away, that's a make or break for this. And if we can't get around this, I think we have no choice but to close. And I think we've shown that we can't get around it. We've identified this as a serious problem. And I think we need to do more work on this before we throw away the underpass.
Yeah. Inyoung, yep.
So you said the closure doesn't have a neighborhood support, and I'm not sure that's the correct statement. Because
What I can, yeah, sorry.
There are people supporting. There are some data that is collected by some non-closure favored people, and they say it's a 60%. That's what the neighborhood consensus is. Not, but I doubt that. So I think because of you don't have a support, there's no support for a closure. There is no support for underpass. You can't just say there's no support for closure.
From what I've heard, it sounds like the neighborhood is very well divided.
Yes.
And possibly, unfortunately, very divided. It felt to me, from the comments I received and even from the little poll I looked at, that the viaduct was very unpopular, but we seem to be getting a steady stream of people on both sides of the issue, and those are the ones who are taking the time to come to us.
So that's what I mean. They're divided. I think that's a fair and square, and we all know it. So.
So Inyoung, on the issue of selecting one alternative, where are you?
Yeah. I'm for my previous comment. Let's simplify. I'm for.
Okay, one.
Selecting one.
Great. And Dave, you as well?
Yeah, I support it too. I mean, we can only look at what we've done so far, and we're going to put a ton of color on what hasn't been done, what has been done, and what the pros and cons that we've looked at as much as we could have studied till right now. And we acknowledge that there's more work to be done on a lot of these things, a lot of the options, and we still have to do that. And so, but based on what we have now, we can still come up with an answer saying like, well, this one looks like the leading contender at this particular intersection, and then just state it as such. And it's like, and then we'll have all the other notes that someone else will take and run with it in the future. But
okay,
yeah, I think we can come up with one.
Okay. All right. So I've got Tony, Carrie, Greg, Inyoung, Dave, and Larry. And Phil, you sounded like you were a little more on the fence, but I think you also were aiming for just one answer. And it's Keith and I who are less comfortable.
Oh yeah, no, I want to be clear. I'm in favor of one answer. Larry's right. We've got to put ourselves on the line here after 2 years and say, this is what we recommend. But oh, by the way, there are disagreements, and no decision is all positive and no negative. I think it was Ed who said a while ago, there's no alternative without its issues. We need to embrace that.
Okay. All right. So with that, does anyone want to take a stab at where we are in terms of closure versus, I don't know what's the easiest way or fastest way to do this. How many of you would favor the closure over the partial underpass? Bill, did you want to take it? You started? Okay. So I see Tony, Greg, In Young, Larry, Dave. That's 5. Anybody, Carrie and Keith, your cameras are off. So if you want to raise your hand digitally, you can do that for me. So this is, do you favor the closure more than the underpass?
What is this? Do you mean favor right now, but we're going to talk about it more, or are you
Yeah,
really trying to shut it down?
No. I really am trying to understand, like, where are we generally, so we
No,
know
I
how-
assume this was favor right now, but we're going to talk about it more. Yes. Okay.
Yeah,
A lot
yeah.
more.
And our minds can be changed. Okay. to
Yeah,
be clear.
exactly.
Okay.
But like right now, where is your brain, right? And kind of where are you? So it looks like it's 5 for closure, and then 5 for not sure or underpass. I'm not sure.
I'm tied at this point.
Yeah. So I think that's kind of. Oh, Larry, you're muted. Go ahead. You can see he's saying something very animated, but I don't know.
We only have 9 people, so it can't be 5-5.
Oh, thank you. I'm off on my numbers again. Okay, so that's already a majority, so that's good. Thank you for that math reminder. I might do that again. These meetings are long. So, okay, all right. Well, does anyone want to take who from the closure side wants to take it on why we should be swayed? And we can kind of go through what Carrie and I discussed, because I asked her to help me take notes on this, is to try to figure out maybe getting all the support for closure, and then if people disagree, we're going to note where folks disagree and why, and that'll help us really kind of flesh out where our sticking points are. Carrie, I don't know if you wanted to share your screen while we do this, if that helps to so that if you're making any notes, we can see them. Cool. Is there any way to increase the font? Or the way it's seen on your, or zoom on your screen, actually, because it looks like we can see ourselves. Oh yeah, perfect. That's much better. Is that easier for everybody else to see as well? I've got a larger monitor, so. Okay, good. Okay, so closure folks, do you want to start with throwing out what your ideas of why we should be compelled, and then if people disagree, we can raise hands on that?
Well, I mean, to me, it really is about, when we say facilitate movement across the corridor for all modes of transportation, and I helped with this, so I should feel some ownership, but I feel like that, here we go. Okay. This doesn't really talk about the experience for pedestrians and bikes. And I think that we've been told by a lot of people, why aren't you thinking about pedestrians and bikes? This is all about cars, and I don't think that's fair. We've talked and thought about pedestrians and bikes at all. I know that both options have a pedestrian bike crossing, but the possibility of having a pedestrian and bike crossing at Churchill, where it already is, that can be relatively wide, is a big plus for the closure. If we're talking about a partial viaduct, the only option is over at Kellogg, where it seems to me more difficult for bikes and peds. It does seem to have, right. Well, Seal is quite a ways from Churchill. And I know that most people come from that side. I mean, if I had, if I had $1 million, right, we would have a crossing at Churchill or Kellogg and at Seal. And I don't see why, if we really value bicycles and pedestrians in this town, why we shouldn't be considering that. I don't think the two have to be linked. But to me, I'm having a hard time not seeing the closure as sort of a wall, which is what people said about the viaduct, even though I just voted to get rid of the viaduct. People called the viaduct a wall that divides our town when it literally wasn't. But in this case, the partial underpass literally is a concrete wall down the middle of Alma Street. And I think for pedestrians and cyclists, it's quite a bit worse. You're all welcome to convince me I'm wrong, but that to me is the most important thing. Other than that, the other things, the small amount of property impacts, the construction methods, even the cost, those are kind of, to me, secondary considerations to the ease of access across the rail corridor, especially because of where it's located in front of Pali. where there are hundreds of, I don't think any of the traffic studies we had took into consideration even a fraction of the number of cyclists at that intersection, because frankly, there are very many few places in the United States outside Palo Alto where you have that number of bicycles congregating in one place at one time. So, Greg, a couple of things I'd like to pick up as themes as we kind of go through this, because I'd like to hear what others think. So, so of the two bike options for closure, it sounds like you favor the one that's in the middle of the street, which I believe is option 2. I think that's option 2. I favor that one pretty strongly. Yeah.
Okay. And you also would favor the concept of if we could add an additional bike ped crossing, that exploring Seal as one of those could be advantageous. Yeah.
I mean, given how important we take cycling and walking in this town, that makes a whole lot of sense. I mean, if we talk about, if some grant money from some mythical government agency fell into our lap, which I think is pretty unlikely considering that we're Palo Alto, that would be, to me, much preferable to spend it on that than many of the other things we talked about.
Yeah, and and then what I'll do is see if we can get a show of hands on this. But part of the reason that's very compelling for me when you make that argument is that, we've always said that we can't test a closure without building the mitigations first. So any of the road mitigations would have to be built first. But in order to build the bike ped tunnel at exactly Churchill, you actually have to close Churchill, which means you don't get to practice anything. And so one thing that I heard in the pros and cons discussion the other day was this concept of maybe the closure of Churchill being reversible. And I warned that I didn't think that was a thing under FRA kind of rules.
Yeah, and Tony didn't think it was possible either.
Yeah, but I would say that if you agreed that we would accept the closure option, if there are 2 bike ped tunnels, you could start by building the traffic mitigations and a bike ped tunnel at Seal, just theoretically. Obviously, all this would need to be studied appropriately and traffic studies and all that. So I'm caveating this gigantically, but there would be the ability to be able to build the traffic mitigations and the Seal bike ped thing and have a safe place for kids to cross. And then you could test the closure to cars and see whether we got the automobile mitigations right. And so that, for me personally, I'll just throw out there, that is, if I can get that, if everybody's on board with that idea, that I can be swayed much to move to the closure side versus being dead center. Because for me, that's a real sticking point, because I don't feel comfortable without having the 2 crossings. And I'm going to show a picture later that it was part of what the rail corridor study that actually Tony was involved in back in the day. That was one of their main things, was really trying to open up as many places as you can cross for bike peds across that membrane.
I don't know what the relative cost is. My understanding was that the intersection improvements are not tremendously expensive. And a bike ped tunnel, I imagine, is not nearly as expensive as some of the things
I think the ballpark was between 20 and 30 million.
Which is a lot, except when we start looking at these other things we have to do.
Yes, pre-COVID.
Yeah.
So, pre-COVID, it's not a lot. Yeah.
Chair, did you want to talk about the idea of having this concept represented in 2 columns or not? I know we just eliminated an option, but it sounds like you're talking about 2 things.
Well, not yet. Let's just wait and discuss. But maybe if we could get a show of hands, how many other people are interested in the concept that Greg is throwing out and that I sort of seconded on also having a bike crossing at Seal for some of the things that, like, just show of hands. Does that sound interesting? Is it something you think is a terrible idea? Would you support looking at it further? So I see Carrie's hand. Keith, I can't see your hands.
My hand is up.
Okay, I've somehow lost my digital view. And okay, I see Larry. Larry, do you want to speak or are you supporting?
Yes, I want to speak. Yes.
Okay.
No, I think Greg's idea is interesting. We ought to include it in the report. But making it a conditional vote goes contrary to the idea that we ought to come up with a recommendation. Because I think that it's, to use a legalistic term, it's sort of a poison pill.
Okay.
Because of money. To introduce that, but this is the real world we're and as Greg himself has mentioned, if somebody's going to drop a lot of money on us. So I think it's a good idea. Whether it can be financed, I sort of doubt, and I'm taking into account sort of normal times rather than what we're in right now, because the I think the normal times will return and we'll have more money at some point later in the decade. But I want us to come up with a crisp recommendation that's realistic and not one that is not. But I certainly think that in the report, we should say something like what Greg is suggesting, that if we're really sincere about doing a lot of biped stuff, that we ought to think about having an additional tunnel as well.
Okay. Anybody else?
I'll stop.
In Young, and then I see Dave. Oh, In Young, you're muted.
Oh, are we commenting on the seal, or can I say something else?
You can say whatever. At this point, we're
Yeah,
trying
yeah.
to have free
Okay.
discussion, so I don't mean to, yeah.
So the H column, maintain access to neighborhood, park, and school, and that's a poor foreclosure. And I think it's a poor for the car, but if people are taking a bike and walking, that closure and having an underpass would be actually it's good.
So I think Carrie has those broken down further. Carrie, if you want to scroll to H, In Young talking about H. And I would focus more In Young. This is, Carrie just kind of filled these out so that we can discuss them, but it's more, yeah, it's more where we are. And I hear what you're saying. Yes, there's a difference between for cars and for bikes. And that's what I think she called out there.
So H, it says a closure with the mitigation is a poor, but in my, for the pedestrian, actually it's good.
So I think H04, you're saying should be good. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Which I would agree with. Okay. Sorry, Dave, and then Tony, I think is who I saw.
Yeah, commenting first on the bike peds of what we have of the two. We have a straight shot through, which is one of two options for closure, and it's the only one that we have for partial underpass. To me, that one is very unsafe. All you have to do is take your bike over to California Ave. Don't even bother waiting, just go right down. I've done it every day with my kids, and I can tell you right now, you can't just do that. It is very narrow. It's going to only be 3 feet more than that one. Okay. And imagine if you have tens of more bikes. I don't know if it's hundreds, but let's say tens. Even if you tried to get two abreast, you will not be able to get anybody coming up the other side. Then the other problem is that is a maximum grade one, 6%, I think. Someone had said if
8%. You're talking about the Kellogg one now, right?
I'm talking about California Ave. Okay. So, but yes, it would be the Kellogg
California Ave is not to ADA compliance because it was built too long ago. So just to be clear, none of them would ever be as steep as Cal Ave.
Oh, okay. So either way, going up the other side is going to be very hard. I can tell you that right now. Even if it's not ADA compliant, even if it was ADA compliant, it's going to be hard. People are going to have to really power up that and be ready for it. And I'll tell you, a bunch of, recreational bikers going up and down that, people have pooped out. I've seen it happen on California, and that's dangerous for everybody behind them, or even for the person in front. They might tip over.
Yeah, so it's definitely not at that grade, though. I just want to be very clear. It's at the maximum of 5%, which is what's allowed under ADA. So
the maximum, Nadia, is 8%, and that's what it's at.
No, I think it's more than that because it violates the ADA. That's why part of why it's on a list of.
I just brought up the section and it was 7%. So we should probably. I'm trying to.
We should get some clarity on this
on the website while we're having this conversation.
Can someone from the city's staff confirm whether Cal Ave is ADA compliant and what the percent might be? I've caught staff off guard. Sorry, staff, to put you on. Go ahead, Ed. You're the first one to show up.
I would say we'd be happy to confirm that. I don't know that anyone has the answer at our fingertips.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm looking at the wrong plan. Actually, there is no plan. There is no sectional view of option 2 in the XCAP website. So I'm sorry, I'm wrong. I don't know what the answer is.
Regardless, if it has to be less grade, then it's going to extend further back on either side, right? It's got to start sooner.
So I think to that point, I'm sorry, I was struggling there with getting my self unmuted and everything, but we would not redesign a tunnel or design a tunnel similar to the California Avenue bike and ped tunnel that currently exists. The grade's too steep, it's too narrow, it's very difficult, and we get complaints. The Office of Transportation gets complaints quite often about it, and certainly that would be. I believe that is outside of what would currently be allowable even. But yeah, the ones that are proposed in the closure are starting back further, and that's the reason why.
And what's the percent grade again? Because we can't all access our documents here.
I would need to pull it up myself.
Okay.
Yeah, it's actually not in the sectional, so Phil would have to look it up for us.
Yeah, if you guys could pull that up, that'd be great.
Chair, it's my understanding that it's 5% for most places, except for at the ramps where it might have a little bit more to meet the ADA requirements.
And is that the same for the Kellogg one as it is for the two Churchill options?
My understanding is that, yes, it's 5% for the bike paths in the most places, except for at the ramp locations where it could be at 8% for just the ramp location.
And Raban, do you have the width handy?
I can certainly look into it, but I believe it is 10 feet.
I thought it was 11, but yeah. It's not much wider than the one that's over California Ave. Even that by itself is dangerous.
Is the width of option 1 and option 2 under the bike options for closure, are they the same?
No, the one I remember on the that is going across the road and going underneath it, jogging 90 degrees is like 20 feet.
Okay, so maybe maybe a good debate about option 1 versus option 2 would be good with the facts, because I mean, even 20 feet you might like. I really like these options, and I think it's a better thing for the town. But I will say, being there with like 500 high school kids on bicycles, if I were a pedestrian, I would be very nervous unless it was as wide as the East Palo Alto bridge. But I mean, I think that's kind of the blue it is.
Okay.
So anyway, either way, those two to me going straight shot really concern me. Right, it's like even just the width itself. Even if we can make it 1% grade, starting all the way back at Emerson, I don't know, as far as back as you wanted to, the width alone would be incredibly scary for that many bikes and peds to go down.
Well, Dave, is there any reason why we couldn't have a recommendation to council that they consider expanding the widths?
If you did that, you'd have to close the roads.
Oh, okay.
Right now there's one lane each way to either side of the opening for either Kellogg or Churchill, depending on what it is.
Yeah, if you look at option 2 on Churchill, I think there's already going to be no street parking for the couple of houses nearest the bike tunnel. And if you made it wider, it would have to be a one-way street or close the street.
All right.
Yeah,
and then you're talking about property, and then there are property impacts.
That's right.
Don't want to do that. Okay, so much for that.
So unless we find a better solution, which to me is the light crossing, we give the bikers a light, a private light to go across, then they can turn down, have a nice wide entryway down. We can make that as long as we want to, 5% or even less than that. It goes around and under, comes back up again. That to me is safer. And also, by the way, preserves if we want a reverse closure, you can actually still do that with that option because you can jog it off to the side of where the road actually is. Okay, so, but you can't do it with either the straight shots. Like you can't do that. Once you do that, those are irreversible, and that's what we've been talking about. Now we keep talking about sealed too. Now, I love the option. I love the concept. However, I do not believe a straight shot down that way is a good idea either. And by the way, the Kellogg ones are slightly different than the Churchill one. The Churchill one at least comes back up straight away up the other side. Kellogg's going to end at a T, right? It's going to go boom, right? So you're going to have people racing down that, and they're going to have to slow down and make a 90-degree turn either way, right or left.
Well, it doesn't have to be 90 degrees. It could be, you could curve it.
Yeah. Carrie,
okay, so we're going to have this dividing curve off to each side that's going to start like way early
Yep.
Someone's going to have to peel off to whichever direction they want without hitting a very pointy thing. Maybe we'll need one of those barrels of water or sand sitting there in case someone hits there, just like an highway, right?
That's only for Teslas, sorry.
Okay,
No,
so
right?
it sounds like going back to kind of the main concept. I think we should. It sounds like we might have to table the bike part because there might be a lot of variation of the answers. And Philip, I saw you come on. Did you need to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to share on the Churchill closure fact sheet. It has this information. It's under by the numbers. It says the pedestrian/bike ramp is 8 to 10 feet wide and approximately 230 feet long with a maximum grade of 8%. 5-foot landings are spaced 35 feet apart, and the dimensions are subject to change in the next phase of design.
And sorry, is that the one at Kellogg, or is that the one for, or is that the one that parallels the tracks, or?
Yeah, well, so this is the closure with mitigations fact sheet. So I think that's just the general design of them, and essentially what that's saying is they wouldn't exceed 8%, which is
They wouldn't exceed 8%, and they also would both be somewhere between 8 and 10 feet.
Yes.
So it's not that one is 20 and one is 8 or 10.
I'd love to check that because I asked specifically like how wide is both of them, and I'd love it if we could do that because I was pretty sure that the one jogging 90 degrees was much wider than the one going down in the middle of the road.
Okay.
So, this also says bike lane widths are 5 to 6 feet.
Okay.
So I'm trying to say, so we're having a detailed conversation about this, but I'm trying to say, like, what is the alternative? So let's imagine that we had no bike crossing at Kellogg or Churchill, and the only bike crossings are at Seal. I think that means a lot of people who would normally be crossing at Churchill today would be crossing at Embarcadero.
Well, actually,
and I think the situation there is a lot worse.
Carrie, can you stop sharing for a second? I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to show you, I wanted to show you, this is the rail corridor study from 2014. So this is work that actually Tony was involved with, but there was a whole group. And so this was kind of just their general concept for their vision, which I thought was useful, which just kind of shows that we have 3 different kind of city center areas, and that the entire vision of that report was that the train creates an east-west membrane, right? And that they were trying to recommend as many permeations through the membrane as possible to be able to really make everyone feel really connected. So their recommendations were this map here. You can see that this is, let me try to zoom it better because I see some of you are struggling. So here's Northern California, right? And they recommended a bike ped crossing at Seal and also one at Kellogg if that was possible. And what I just wanted to note for those that don't live in North Palo Alto, what ends up happening is most of the bicycle traffic that is coming across Churchill is basically, if you live north of Embarcadero, you're basically going through Embarcadero to get to Pali. And then if you live south of Churchill, it's basically all of these folks who are coming to Pali. If we're just talking about Pali, obviously there's folks who also go to Stanford. Those are not the only commuters. So while it might look like moving the bike ped tunnel to Churchill makes more sense because of the proximity to Churchill, it's obviously closer from Kellogg to Churchill than it is from Churchill to Seal. This actually, the closer you get this way, the more of the folks are the folks that already could take Embarcadero. So really it's the folks further south that you're serving with a Seal Avenue bike path. And I wanted to say that it's a shame that we don't have someone from Safe Routes to School, but I know Penny Ellison has said before in public comment, Seal is actually one of the main connectors and would connect with the way the Safe Routes to School stuff works. And so for me, what was compelling about the kind of thing that Greg was talking about was, again, if you were trying to build a closure and you were going to build mitigations first, you could build a bike ped thing at Seal and that would provide the kids a way to cross before you started messing with the actual closure part to vehicular traffic. But even though Seal is further away from Pali, it's kind of counterintuitive because the majority of the traffic comes from the southern section. And there's one other map that you can see the distances here. And so it's 1/10 of a mile between Kellogg and Churchill, but it's only 1/3 of a mile between Churchill and Seal. So it's not a long distance at all. So that's it. I just wanted to point those out.
Yeah, I think that's very clear. Like I think that's very good information. So if you look at the matrices and the H for the partial underpass, it's not good. It's actually not very good for the bikes.
Yeah, could I make an observation? Are we
Unless
forgetting
they put
about,
something here.
sorry, are we forgetting about pedestrians here? Because maybe to a cyclist, that difference in spacing is not important, but for pedestrians, it certainly is.
Thank you, Phil.
Yeah, that brings up a good point. And so I think to what, now it's like, if money was no object, that would be the
pedestrians can walk infinitely and at great speed, but
right.
Pedestrian, I'm way more sensitive than I am as a cyclist to distance.
Right. And so, and a question that we obviously don't know the answer to is, let's assume for a second that we had enough money to build a crossing at Kellogg and at Churchill and at Seal. Where would the majority of the bikes end up being?
It would be wonderful if we could get that data, because
yes.
I mean, again, I think we lead the country in bike commuting for our school kids, and no one's going to solve this for us. I was able to bring up the safe routes to school map for Pali, which is not that hard to find.
Oh, you want to share your screen and you can show us?
Ooh, if I could figure, I don't usually use
At the very bottom in the center, you have this green button that says screen share.
Can I just share my one? I'm just going to share my one tab here.
Yes, you should be able to do that.
You should see my safe routes to school map. This is the safe routes to school map.
Oh, there it is. Okay, yeah.
Now, this is, of course, the people who do safe routes to school, of whom my wife is actually represented my school in that. But this is based on existing conditions. But what they recommend is that kids from the north part of town cross actually on the Homer Tunnel and ride along the Embarcadero path to Pali. And that presumably kids from the South Palo part of town will probably end up on Churchill or maybe Cal Ave.
Mm-hmm.
So this is, for what it's worth, I don't know if this represents where the kids actually go. I think kids are kids, and they ride along with no hands on the handlebars, and they go whatever way they go. They do, really. They're very skilled
and
in this.
And their helmets on the handlebars, yeah.
Yes. But this is what they're recommending the kids do.
And so the line that is where Pierce Park is, if you follow the cursor directly straight to the right, all the way to Embarcadero, that is Seal. Right, and so
I could see why that would be a very good place for a crossing. Yeah.
Yeah, so that means that everything north of that potentially, they can travel in both directions, obviously, to track back to get to what becomes the main feeder on the west side. So thank you. This is super helpful.
So here's the link up here. I can send it to people later, but this was not hard to find with a Google search. So I'll stop sharing.
I'd love to point out that if we had a light at Seal, we could just have the bikers cross, and then we could build a path through the park for bikers and peds to walk and connect to the roads beyond it. We wouldn't need an underpass.
How?
Yeah, there would be inconvenience of the light.
What about the train tracks?
Oh, sorry.
It's okay.
If we had a viaduct, that would not be a problem.
It's okay. I had the next step members before Dave, so I totally got you.
Thank you.
The viaduct doesn't go all the way straight to the Seal. It comes down, so it won't help.
No, yeah. And matter of fact, one of the things I did when I have talked about the viaduct before was I would say there are more places to cross, and then I would look on the map and see where you could actually go, and there actually isn't anywhere.
Yeah, so you can't cross with the viaduct.
Right.
So it's not really viaduct. It's a little overhead over Churchill.
Okay. All right. Well, we veered into an important but detailed conversation about the bike thing, which I think is useful. Tony, I saw your hand.
Just to add to what Phil said, and also Dave, about the experience in this, the presently planned bike path. I think it's uncomfortable for pedestrians. We're talking mainly about bikes. 10 feet wide is way too small, and we don't have the room to make it wider. And then you have 230 feet at 8% grade, and then you go through a tunnel that's 200 feet long, that's artificially lit, and you come out the other side 230 feet again at 8%. I don't think the area, we don't have the area to do this well. And coming from beautiful sidewalks and beautiful trees into this place that doesn't feel like Palo Alto to me.
I'm hearing you pitch the viaduct again, but now we got to.
No, I'm not pitching the
Okay,
viaduct.
that's what it sounds like.
I think that's gone.
Yeah,
But
it is. That's what I was going to remind you of.
yeah. No, I'm not pitching the viaduct. And I don't like the viaduct on along the backyards of Mariposa.
Yes, I know.
So then, yeah, the part about the closure that really bothers me, this is switching to closure. I don't know if we've talked about that.
It's okay, yeah.
Okay, so the closure, what bothers me is that the mitigations affect neighborhoods outside of the immediate location. And there's some opposition to that 7-lane intersection. I think it can be done better, but I think we need to be cautious about the mitigations that export our problems.
Yeah, I would like to say that I agree with everything Tony said. And in addition, I may be the one who raised this issue originally, but I'm really worried about traffic projections not going beyond the year 2030.
Mm-hmm.
And that to me is if this were 2000, I'd say great, but we're in the year 2020 right now. And we're talking about 2030, but we might find that by the time this construction is done, we're past the year 2030.
Oh,
easily. Yeah. Now, that isn't to say that those intersection mitigations aren't good. They're probably relatively low cost. Cost of paint is part of it. There's some obvious civil construction. Those are probably worthy of standing alone. But to simply say we're going to dump the problems away from Churchill onto Embarcadero, which is also residential, I don't think that's equitable.
Mm-hmm.
As a matter.
Well, you're assuming that 2030 traffic will be much more, and you don't know. People are working at home and they promote working at home. So you don't know. That assumption, I have some question
Let me say this very clearly. If you look at the United States economic history, we've been through some real disasters. The Depression, the 2008 financial meltdown, and each time the country's managed to recover. Now, that doesn't mean it's going to look the same as it did before, but the economic fundamentals are the same. Also, right now, companies are enjoying this honeymoon with this idea of working at home. I can tell you as a work at home consultant, I hated that. Also, once employees find out that they can't be in the office and participate in all the small group discussions, they could probably say, I want to go back to the office. Maybe not 5 days a week, but some days a week.
So can we get some clarification?
I just want to be clear on that.
I have been telecommuting for 20 years, and then I hated it, and I went to office, and I hate going to office, so I get a job. So it's a go back and forth, and I think, but in general, in trend, I think my assumption is personal, and I think people, like especially Silicon Valley job, I think working at home will be promoted.
Yeah,
and,
I can just. I've been a Silicon Valley consultant, and I've had clients who are Silicon Valley. Non-Silicon Valley.
Can I call a timeout for just a second? I hear you both passionately on either side of this. What I did want to ask is if we could ask the Office of Transportation staff. So whether I see that Ripon and Philip are here. Could you talk a little bit about why our traffic numbers end at 2030, and like when is that traffic model going to be updated, and how often is it updated, and what's normal? Understanding that there is a new normal, but that's a whole other conversation. But
yeah, that's good. Can I first say a few things? Actually, first of all, Ripon said that he has information about the bike length and slope, so he can chime in on that.
That'd be great.
But coming back, I was just going to mention that we're working on our new sustainability plan, sustainability and climate action plan, and it's likely that recommendations that will be in that include recommendation for staff to telework, telecommute on a continued ongoing basis. Now, that I'm not talking about City of Palo Alto, I'm talking about businesses, in Palo Alto. So I think it's likely that, we're going to be seeking, some sort of continuation. Now, that doesn't mean everybody, that doesn't mean every day, but that means that there's going to be certainly a discussion about whether we put policies into place that, dictate that. Regarding the traffic model, I'm not sure. I'm sorry, I can't speak to that at this point. I need to come back to our look more into our process to see when we typically update that. So I'm not sure when we last updated that and when we will next update that, but I know that our current plan goes to 2030, and yeah, there's, potential shift, and that's kind of what, unfortunately, that's one of the challenges with long range planning.
And is that the comprehensive plan that ends at 2030 and that's why, or is it part of a traffic model?
I believe that's the reason why is for the comprehensive plan, the comp plan.
Yeah, I see Ripon.
I'm sorry, it's a point of order. I think that we should be on record as saying that while the general public is hearing all these discussions, we have not made any formal decisions yet.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah, but the point is, it should be very clear that people shouldn't run out and tweet or email that we've rejected the viaduct, or that these are the reasons we want to do either the closure or the mitigations or the underpass. That this is all still very much in flux.
Okay.
Okay.
Noted. Yeah.
Thank you.
Ripon, go ahead.
So I did check with AECom on the widths and the slopes issue for the Churchill option, and I would like to correct myself that I previously stated. The slope that was shown on the plans for the bike bed tunnel is at 8% at this time.
Which bike bed tunnel? Option 1 or option 2 or both?
Option 1, option 2, and Kellogg tunnel. At this time is shown at 8%, and there's flat ramps at the 5-foot ramps at the exit and entry. So and they are about 10 feet width at the entry and exit points, but it could be wider underneath the tracks. So when you get into the outside of the roadway section, the ramp slopes were taken right now as a ADA constraint, as a maximum ADA allowable thing, but it could be expanded, and we would just have to ramp it further back to accommodate for the lower grades if needed, or if required.
And does anybody know from Office of Transportation, do we currently have an example of a 5% grade versus an 8% grade in the city that the average bike person would be like, oh, it's like that? I think that my guess would be that the little side ramps on the Homer tunnel would be whatever max ADA is, because it's such a short squeeze. That may be 8%. Is that what 8% would feel like? Is that a good?
Yeah,
I'm not very familiar with this.
Yeah, I'm just going to say I'm not sure what the different grades are there, but I think comparing that to a longer tunnel is a little bit different.
Agreed. Mm-hmm.
When you've got a longer tunnel like this, part of the grade might be.
Oh, Philip, you muted yourself again.
Oh, sorry about that. I don't know how that happened. I was just saying it's very different comparing a short little undercrossing to a longer ramp where the slope could be more spread out and you don't really feel it quite as much.
Do we know what the grade is on the current California crossing and on the new bike bridge that goes into East Palo Alto? Because then anyone who's really interested could go try those out over the weekend, because you can't go anywhere else.
I don't know what the California is, but I believe it exceeds what we would maximum allowances are currently.
I think it's 12%, but I'm not super sure.
I'm just going to say it exceeds it in so many different ways, because I think that it's the height, the width, and the all things that we could not currently.
Yeah. So Philip, how about the University Avenue underpass? Do you have any information on that?
No, I can try and search for all of these things, but I don't have any.
Exactly. All right. Good.
Great. Okay. Yeah, Carrie.
Do we think we're getting off track here? I thought we were going to stay a little bit
Probably.
more high level. Yeah. I mean, we've got an hour and 10 minutes left on today's discussion.
Okay. Thank you for that. Okay. So going back to, there seemed to be some consent, some more general interest in closure versus partial underpass. Do we want to, does anybody feel really strongly that they can't support a closure? And do you want to talk about the why? Sure, Phil.
For the reasons I've already stated, we're exporting traffic, number one, exporting the problem, number one, number two, the short time horizon for the forecasts.
Okay.
And I could add third is irreversibility of a closure given FRA's policy.
Unless you did what I suggested. Just want to throw that out there.
Okay.
Okay. Anybody
I don't
else?
want to go pick a fight with the FRA. We have enough problems.
Yeah. Tony.
So I can support it, but I would really ask council to look at the mitigations and see if they're better ones. If it's not as extensive and doesn't send the problem to a different neighborhood. Or
Yeah, I mean, is it fair to say at this stage, any alternative that we're putting forth, the recommendation, we are still asking council, we would still be saying to council, look, we're choosing this, but these are all the areas where we think it needs more work. I mean, none of these are okay, this is, you get what you get and there's nothing more to say. And I think before COVID, there was well, maybe the closure is about as baked as it's going to get. I think now post-COVID, that's probably not the case. And so given that finance has now become sort of one of the forefront issues. So I think that I don't know anybody who thinks that the alternatives exactly the way they've been presented are 100% great and we can support them and council can just get going. Does that seem fair? Anybody object to that? Okay, yeah, Larry. Yeah, Larry, go ahead.
I want to pick up on what Carrie was saying, because I think.
Yep, I hear you.
Ah.
Oh, maybe we're freezing up on his side.
Well, I'll try talking again. Maybe it'll pick up. Okay,
we can
good.
Hear you.
I wanted to pick up on what Carrie was saying.
Oh, no.
Well, keeps telling me my internet connection is unstable, but
Larry,
sorry.
you can try shutting off your video.
I want to pick up on what Carrie was saying, that I think we're drifting over here. I think we think that try doing what?
You can try shutting off your video in the lower left corner. If you hover your mouse where the mute button is, you can also hit stop video and that will boost your audio signal.
Well, we'll see.
We can hear you now.
Okay. I think we ought to concentrate first on the basic issue with whether a 2/3 majority of us support closing Churchill, and then move to the question I think that Greg and Dave have raised, which I think is a very good one, which is what type of bike head access would we then support? I think that they've raised good questions, and I think that we ought to come back on that one a week from now. But I think that it would be appropriate for us to set the basic policy, if there's enough votes for it, to say that this is what we're in favor of. And I am. I think that when you focus on what we're going to do, and I would recall to you all that we've agreed from the start that there's no perfect alternative, one that even was close to being perfect. All of them have defects, but I think that the closing Churchill has less than any of the other alternatives. And you've got to move forward at some point on these things. And sort of, this is a repeat in some ways, but no agency is going to be able to study multiple alternatives forever. At some point, you've got to cut and say, this is what we're going to focus on. So in my mind, closing Churchill has two main reasons. And one is cost, and the other is the aesthetics of it. There'll be a lot less, third one would be a lot less construction time. As for Phil's point, I think that I would basically disagree. I think, of course, there'll be some exporting of the traffic to other areas, Reed, Embarcadero, but I think that it's more than manageable. And particularly when you say that, realize that that so-called increased traffic is going to be spread out. I know at least one neighbor always likes to talk about the 7,000 cars as if they were all going to arrive there at the same time. Of course, not so. And this for the 7 lanes of traffic, that really is an exaggeration as well, because it's really in the same right of way that you've got right now. And it's only, you get the 7 lanes only when you start counting bike lanes and a few things like that. So it seems to me it's a clear choice. The partial underpass, I think, has just too many problems that people have already noted, so I don't want to go on that point. But I think to move things along, what we ought to do is say that that's what we want to do, and to bring back the bike issue either a week or 2 weeks from now, when staff and AECom can give us a little more data on some of the issues that have been raised.
Okay, Keith, I see your hand up, and then Carrie.
I agree with Phil that we would be exporting the issue, exporting the traffic. But I still come back to the fact that we have neighborhood support here, and we're rejecting this for reasons that are knowable, and that we haven't tried to make this work. We've took one cut at it. It has some deficiencies. As Larry noted, aesthetics is one issue and cost is another. We haven't looked at issues of, can we shrink the lanes? Can we raise the tracks a few feet? Raising the tracks a few feet would drastically reduce the amount of excavation, reduce the impacts to the neighbors, property acquisitions. There's a lot of things like that we just have not looked at. And would that be would that mitigate it enough that we would say, yes, this is worth it?
I agree with Keith. Sorry.
Yeah, me too.
Yep, me too.
But I'm confused because I thought we're not creating a new scenario. We were going to comment on what we already have. We continue to discover, more better way of doing things. This deliberation or it's never going to end any recommendation.
Well, I think the thing is that of the new alternative, right, that we've run out of time and frankly money to be able to go any further. And also it's true that no matter which alternative we pick, what we're saying to City Council is, we know you're going to now spend more money, and this is our choice for the one we want you to do further evolution on. So I think what, and Keith and Phil and Tony, correct me if I'm wrong, but what they're saying is they still see that the partial closure has the best possibility. And they think that if you devoted more time and some further engineering, you could be able to figure out some of the things that are currently the reasons why folks are voting against it. And they're most moved by the fact that while obviously both Old Palo Alto and Southgate are being impacted, Southgate is probably disproportionately being impacted. And that there's, at least from, a cursory survey that was done, which, could be flawed, of course, but there does seem to be some significant support from the neighborhood that would be most impacted.
Okay, so
I'll comment. Did I get that right?
Yeah. Okay, I got it. But I thought we decided on how we're going to approach this is we are going to make a comment on the side note. Maybe that was just a seal underpass case, but what I have a problem with everybody commenting, especially Keith commenting on neighborhood support. Neighborhood support is divided. We decided on divided. And then I think Keith is focusing on one particular neighborhood support both times. And then also the Phil, I think he favors car traffic and then, giving reasons for the traffic in the future, the traffic is dispersed and it's not gonna, but there is a traffic record. And I have a hard time understanding these reasons because I think you particularly focusing on one thing, not like overall, like other studies. That's my comment.
Okay. Did anybody else have anything?
I mean, I will say that all of these things have an impact on somebody. So the partial overpass has less of an impact on folks over by Embarcadero, but it has an impact on people on Kellogg, and it has a construction impact and a bit of a visual impact on people near Churchill. So, and again, when we get to South Palo Alto, it's going to be even more of these trade-offs. It all has an impact on somebody, and we have to find a way to balance those sometimes, which is not fun. I'm very aware, and I don't think there's any traffic study in the world that every resident of Palo Alto will get together and say, this is an exactly accurate prediction of the future. I know that when you close one crossing, cars are going to go somewhere else.
Well, let's go. Sorry, go ahead. I put my head down and I missed someone. Go.
One of the things that we have uncovered through this process is that we have problems with our roads in addition to whatever we're working on for the railroad crossings. And I think it's very important for us to emphasize in our report, regardless of which direction we recommend, that serious work needs to be done to fix the safety and flow on Embarcadero. I think that's just, you know, the more I've researched it, the more I've listened to neighbors of every neighborhood that I can, I'm finding, you know, the points are good. The points are valid. It is not safe for students who are trying to go to school through the Embarcadero path. We have identified some problems with the underpasses, right? These are all valid, and they can all be valid at once. We still have to make a recommendation, but I think it's totally within our power to say, by the way, we uncovered these other major issues that will also need attention.
Separately.
So why don't we?
Well, so can Carrie.
So why don't we working on your matrices and then we're making a comment? Why don't we make all the Phil's comment and Keith's comment in there?
Sure.
So why don't we just
can
continue working on your matrices and then we have everybody's point going in the matrices instead of
we can do that. Yeah, I mean,
instead
I
of
think
like having so many different discussions that, you know, one favors the other, and you know,
Sure.
make me very uncomfortable, because when somebody says, oh, this is neighborhood consensus, but I know that's not true, so it's make me very uncomfortable.
I think, no, I don't, just to be fair, Ying, I don't think anybody said that there was consensus. I think what we said is there seemed to be there seemed to be slight preference. No, everybody saw the survey
I know,
results.
no. Keith said there is a neighborhood support, and then there is a different support. So I have a problem with that.
But he didn't say it was unanimous. He said there
Yeah.
seems to be an indication of support. I just want to be very fair. I don't think anybody.
I know, but yeah, I can say same thing, exactly turn around. I have a, you know, neighborhood support of closing. I can say exactly the same thing, you know, opposite to it, and which is not, you know.
Yeah. So I've been trying to capture comments as we go along. I'm not sure if I've got everything, but
Carrie, why don't you lead the discussion, because you know the matrix best, and you know, Larry, by my count, you talked about needing 2/3 of a vote, and there was 4 of us who are sort of on the fence, so we don't have the full 6. So I think that means that reverting to the exercise of kind of looking through the matrix to have a more structured conversation probably makes sense now. So Carrie, I'll let you drive.
I would take.
What was that, Larry?
Nadia, I have no problems with that. I don't think our job is to fill in the matrix because people can weigh the matrix points in different ways. For example, just cost. People may look at that in very, very different ways. On the matrix, it sort of has equal weight, and to many of us, there's more to it than that. And so, you have counted those as to some degree, but I think that we only find out when we actually put it to the vote. And if we have, even if it's only 5-4, that means that there are even more people opposed to the partial underpass. So then where do we go? I think then, well, we talked about this a long, long time ago. If there isn't a supermajority, then both things would go forward. But I would hope that we can continue talking. But filling in the matrix isn't going to provide the answer.
Well, would you be comfortable filling in the notes on the matrix, not the part that gives it a good, poor, not so good, whatever? In other words, not the part that is qualitative, more the part that is, or that gives the rating, just the part that captures what the sticking points are.
I don't understand where we're going on that. So what
I think because
when that happens.
I think, well, Inyan was saying that she's uncomfortable ping-ponging back and forth, and she'd like to go through it in a more structured way. And this way we can go through and just talk about, okay, are there, who agrees and disagrees with, you know, this statement or that statement? Does that, Inyan, does that?
Okay, so I think if, you know, I thought people, you know, have different opinions. So I thought, you know, you make a point what the comments are. So when, city council look at it, oh, these are the, other opinion or, agreeing opinion, they could look at the notes. But in the same, I also agree with Larry that, what are, it's not really quantitative, right? So I think we have to decide what we want to do. We want to focus on making this recommendation good, fair. Through the argument, we decide what is a correct, whether we pick the good or okay or poor. If there is a problem, we just review it. Or, we can have a comment and put it in. I'm either, it's okay for me.
Okay. All right, Larry, we can take it your way if you want. You want to, oh, sorry, Dave, I saw your hand up.
I only want to say, like, when I had sent a message to you guys about really just, we agree on most of it, I think. And it's just a few things here and there where we don't. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where we're at the point now where we just have to note that we disagree on these things. That's why it's a 5-4. And that's it. I mean, like, let's move on.
I think Larry wants to get a vote on that, if I'm hearing you correctly, Larry, right? You want us to be on record as with what the number would be, and then we'll just go through that. Is that accurate?
Yeah, and I'd have to go back to the guiding principles as to what we said when there was a majority, but not a 2/3. And I just frankly don't remember. But I think it would be useful to, rather than just sort of trying to deduce from what people have been saying as to where they are, let's vote and see where they really are.
Sure. Okay. Do you want to make a motion?
Sure. I move that our recommendation as a preferred alternative to the council is the closure of Churchill with mitigations, and that also with regard to the bike ped mitigation, that we continue that aspect of it for a week or two until we can get some more information on the issues that have been from AECOM and the staff on the issues that have been raised here today.
Okay. Anybody want a second, Larry?
I can second that.
Okay, Tony. Tony, do you want to speak to your second?
I think Larry did.
I know you get a chance to too.
I think it's the most reasonable alternative. Excuse me, I have to drink some water. Can you come back to me?
Yeah, no worries.
I just agree with what Larry just said. I do think that the mitigations should be.
Not anybody has to speak my motion?
Pardon?
Oh, yeah, sorry, Larry. I thought you did, but you can take it, Larry, and then Tony, I'll come back to you so you can drink some water. Go ahead, Larry.
I have three hopefully brief points. One, I respect the views of the neighbors. I've learned a lot from them, but we are clearly not to be making a decision on the basis of what public input we get. I think that was very clear in our directions from the council. Two, whether there are other alternatives or whether the partial underpass could be improved. Of course, that's always a possibility, but we've had a lot of people speak to us and a lot of people consider it, and those improvements have not been forthcoming. So I don't know what they would be, but we've had a lot of people, the staff, the consultant, and our very, very smart, creative fellow citizens, and it hasn't happened yet. So I have to assume it's not going to. Do I have a third point? No, I think I'll stop right there.
Okay. Tony, did you want to add anything else?
I just think it's the most reasonable. Sorry, no, I can't speak.
It's okay, no worries. Okay, did anybody?
Here's some water.
Thanks, Bill.
Well, I went off video.
For what it's worth, I don't know how the town council and the school board do like their 7-hour meetings without ever going to the bathroom or drinking or whatever.
I kind of want to give them all hats with the water bottles up here. They can just drink from the straw.
Well, that's the other problem. Other end is also a problem.
Exactly. Yes. Okay. Tony, let me know if you're ready to speak.
I'm not sure if I have anything else to add. I think it's the most reasonable alternative. I think it's the lowest cost. I think the mitigations have to be studied and looked at carefully to minimize the amount of impact on adjacent neighborhoods and adjacent streets. Yeah, I have concerns about how, some part of Palo Alto, the community in Southgate that might have to change their routes to get east. But I think.
Oh, Tony, I think you muted yourself. Oh, we lost Tony there. Tony, can you unmute yourself? We lost your audio for a second and missed the tail end of what you were saying.
My internet is going unstable.
Okay. We can hear you now if you wanted to finish. You were saying that the folks would have to go elsewhere.
Yeah, there is that concern, but I think other neighborhoods do it. Evergreen Park does it. They go around and people get used to it. I think the neighborhood will become a little bit better because they don't have that through traffic. Both neighborhoods will become a little bit better. The downside is the exporting to Embarcadero and Page Mill, which I think we should revisit. So that's as much as I can say.
Okay, Carrie, I see your hand.
As long as we feel we can express our concerns about the mitigations effectively so that they would be understood to be part of the recommendation, I would be okay with this.
Okay. Anybody else want to speak to it?
I'll speak to it. I mean, just repeat what I said before, is that I think this is the issue of fairness, and I don't think we've given this underpass a fair shake. And I think the neighbors, whether it's 60-40 or 50-50 or whatever, both the people in Embarcadero and the people in Southgate, there's a significant number of people who are interested in this. And I don't think we've really done them a service. I think we are cutting this off before we've really fleshed it out.
Huh. I would just say I support.
What kind of attention do you think will feel more clear, Keith?
I would want, well, I mean, the wild card also is this: can we shrink it enough by shrinking the lanes to avoid Caltrain right away? If that's not the case, and Caltrain doesn't want to give us the right of way, then that kills it in our decisions made. But if we can shrink it, and we can either cut the costs or improve the aesthetics and remove some of the concerns, like Larry, those are two of the points that Larry concerned about, is the aesthetics and the cost. And for example, if you raise the tracks a few feet and we're able to cut the costs and we're able to improve the aesthetics so there's less concrete, does this become feasible? And if we go through and do this and find out that we at least give a fair shake to the community, and then we say, no, you can't have it, they at least feel that they've been treated with respect. And I think right now we're giving them such superficial analysis that I don't think they're going to feel like they've been treated fairly.
So in the time-wise, you think more, in order to do that kind of support, city has to spend more money on studying, right?
Yeah, you have to do, instead of 5% engineering, I think we have to do 10%. And we haven't done 5% on this anyway. We've done 2% engineering on this. But, and it's not like we're holding up the show. This is going to be put on the shelf for a while. And maybe when we take it off the shelf, things will have changed. Maybe we'll be in such financial duress that number 1, 2, and 3 are all costs. And at that point, then we say we go to the lowest cost option. But we don't know exactly what's going to be the situation in that time. And I just think there's enough uncertainty and enough promise in this idea that we should at least give it a fair shake.
Can I go?
Yeah, Carrie, go.
I object to saying that we haven't given it a fair shake. I think we've taken this idea and explored it in depth. We prioritized this idea and did research on it and asked for additional funding. I'm just, you know, it's fine that we can disagree on it, but I would hate to characterize this as somehow unfair and unexplored.
Okay. Larry, did you have something to say? My speaker box went over to you, so I can't tell if that's, I can't see you, so I can't see if you're raising your hand.
I'll speak up when I want to.
Okay, sorry. Okay. Is there anybody else who wanted to speak to this? Greg or Phil?
I've said what I need to.
Okay.
I'm not as convinced of the superiority of the bike crossing for the closure option, given the long discussion we just had about grades and percentages and widths and things. So if you're asking me to make a final answer right now, that's going to be hard for me.
Yeah. Okay.
So I don't know whether whether I'm making a final answer.
Final answer of what? Like to whether.
So Larry, we have a motion on the table, which is
Right.
Larry is saying that our recommendation would be a closure, and that we would with mitigations, and that we would bring back the bike piece at a subsequent meeting to have more details. Philip, yes. Oh, I think you're muted, Philip.
Sorry, I wasn't trying to say anything. I was shooing somebody out of my room.
Oh, okay. With the virtual background, all I see is a hand going like this.
Would the name be Connor?
No, it was actually my wife.
Ooh. That'll cost you, Philip.
Okay, so yeah, to be clear, In Young, what the vote is on Larry's motion.
Okay.
And so that's what this is on. And yeah, I mean, I'm sort of where Greg is and sort of where Keith is as well. I would like to be able to come up with one answer. I'm really struggling. I do think that no matter what we decide for financial reasons and just, COVID and lots of reasons, this is going to sit for a while. And some of the things that are unknowns, we may get answers to without even having to do anything. As an example, as Caltrain and High Speed Rail figure out their issues, they will come to a conclusion about where 4 tracks can be, and the potential of then having some encroachment there becomes a different discussion than if they're still contemplating 4 tracks there. So I just wanted to throw that out there. I did want to also note that nobody has discussed the possibility that Caltrain has left open, that there might have to be 4 tracks in any one of the alternatives that we've looked at. I'm not saying it's something we should focus on, but I just did want to acknowledge that that's a.
Yeah, I just think that turns our non-9-dimensional problem into a 27-dimensional
Agreed.
problem, and
Agreed.
I've just,
which is why I just wanted to acknowledge it and put it aside, but it's important to stay.
I'm very sympathetic to the points that Phil made about equity, and I think again I'm going to feel that more strongly when we get to South Palo Alto, where we're talking about more severe property impacts. I think that the mitigations go a long way towards making the closure more equitable. But yeah, it moves the impact from one neighborhood to another.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where I'm sitting. So if I have to make a final decision now, it's going to be hard. If I get to do it next week, then I'm going to have to make myself pick.
Okay. I think right now we're just trying to count noses so we can figure out whether frankly we have the votes to say, okay, this is what we're focusing on, and then we're going to spend the next meeting filling in the bike piece, or maybe the meeting after, and then also doing our best pros and cons and suggestions for both of the alternatives anyway, in case council doesn't pick whatever we suggest. So I think at this point then we should call vote. So if whoever, I guess I have to call the vote in order. Let me get my.
Would it be all right to clarify one more thing before
we can restate the motion? Yes.
Yes.
And I'd like to clarify something as well, please.
Okay, just the clarification I want to make is around the mitigations. I think those mitigations are a suggestion at this point, and that we would recommend with us, if we did this recommendation, would recommend strongly that those mitigations be improved, so that we address the equity thing, so we address the bike lane concerns, right? I don't think we're designing to that level. I think we have some suggestions that have come to us to help us imagine what it would look like. We found some obvious issues with those, and that we would urge council to address those before implementing this. That's my understanding. I want to make it clear because I don't want to have equity problems. I don't want to have unsafe bike routes, right? I don't want those things.
Yeah, that's my understanding as well.
Okay.
And I hope that's part of the motion. And
Yeah, it's closure plus mitigations, the mitigations that have been spelled out so far. Philip?
Yeah, that's pretty much to the point that I needed clarification on as well, because I think, what I can see the XCAP doing is determining, whatever preferred alternative that you have, and saying these are the things that we'd like, this next phase of the project to look at and to try and incorporate. And, specific to, I'm not sure what information you'd like us to return to next meeting. Greg, you were saying some things about the, potentially like the bike raids at Homer and things like that. But I just say that, to a certain extent, we can design the bike grade, the width and all that stuff to be what we want. There's just, there's a cost associated with it, and there's a length that's associated with having a shorter, a less steep grade. So I think those can kind of be designed based on, what direction, council gives us.
But I did want to be super clear. I recall, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I do remember a point where we were saying, where Ed was trying to help us boil down the alternatives. And it was like, look, either you want us to go further studying a viaduct, or you want us to study a partial underpass. But with the closure, given the traffic study we've done, the mitigation suggested by Hexagon are what they are. And that would be, it would be closure with the mitigations that they suggested. And I think that there seems to have been a shift, partly I think because we've understood that, for example, the bike plan on the north side of Embarcadero still hasn't been clarified, and how those meet up with the concerns that have been expressed by the bike community and stuff. I'm no longer hearing it as such a strident, like whatever was in the Hexagon report is the only mitigations we're getting with this, unless the committee asks for anything more. There seems to be more flexibility in saying, and maybe perhaps a recognition that because of COVID, this may not be implemented anytime soon, that if we're going to go with this alternative, there has to be further study, because either traffic numbers will need to get updated, bike ped plans will need to be updated, or there's other concerns from the committee. Is that fair?
Well, I wouldn't say that COVID has impacted any of this. I don't think that's fair at all. I mean, from my perspective, COVID is a temporary situation. You could say,
I just mean from the time frame perspective, right? And
right.
budgets.
Right. That's fair, but I guess just further to the point, I think like as XCAP is recommendation to council will direct us, potentially to move forward with an alternative. And I think that different criteria could enter. I think that what I understand the mitigations to be is the baseline for what we would require in order for it to function the way that we want it to. So I would say expanding or suggesting that, we want more width for a bike lane or anything like that. I think, we want to design things to be optimal. So, yeah.
Okay.
And I don't think that really has much to do with, the economic climate or COVID or any of that. Not, and I know that's not what you meant, but.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, so Larry, one more time for, Tony, go ahead. And then I'm going to make Larry restate his motion for, I think, the third time.
I just understood the motion to be closure with mitigations, but that the mitigations would be looked at again, not that we are approving the existing mitigations. Is that correct, Nadia? You said?
Yes, I'm saying we're just voting to differentiate between who's for partial closure or whether we can prefer a closure at this, if we can prefer closure with mitigations or a partial underpass. And then we'll come back to, okay, these are the baseline mitigations. What are we adding to that? And or the part about bike option 1 or 2 and what we want to talk about around that. So, all right, Larry, one more time for the record and for the final.
Yes, that we state that our preferred alternative recommendation to the council is to close Churchill with the mitigations that have been described by the consultant, but to be given further consideration with the bike ped crossing or underpass or whatever to be not included in the motion at the present time, but to be studied further at one of our next few meetings with staff and consultant to provide us information on some of the issues that have been raised. And Philip, to answer your question, I think that one of the things that we'd like to hear more about, in addition to the grades and things like that, is whether you can have a quick look at seeing the feasibility of the tunnel at Seal. Anyway, that's the motion.
Okay, and it allows for expanding on the baseline mitigations. Yes, Larry?
Correct.
Okay, just checking. Greg, was that for us or was that for a family member?
That was giving directions to a family member.
Okay, just checking. Maybe we need to have like right arm for family, left arm for XCAP.
I know. I need to like turn off my video when they ask me questions.
No, it's totally fine. This is just, life in Zoom. Okay, great. So I will call the vote. So Greg.
Yes.
Phil.
No.
Tony. Oh, Tony's muted.
I don't have my hand up.
No, I'm asking you to vote. Are you voting to support
Oh.
Larry's motion?
Yes.
Okay. In-Young.
Yes.
Larry.
Yes.
Me, I'm a no. Keith.
No.
Dave.
Yes.
Carrie.
Yes.
Okay. So that is 6 people. Or 7. I've lost count at this point. There's more than what you needed.
6-3. Someone counted.
That was 6-3.
Yes. Okay. So right on the line. Okay. Well, so how do we want to move forward from this point? Do we want to discuss what the baseline mitigations are? It sounds like we have to pause on the bike ped thing, but we can talk more about what other additional baseline mitigations you'd want for closure. So my first one is I would like there to be some analysis, cost estimate, whatever, of reopening Park Boulevard for the Southgate residents and whether that makes sense from a transportation perspective or not. I think Hexagon looked at it and I'm not sure it's necessary from a traffic perspective, but I would like for there to be some participation from the neighborhood more extensively and from Evergreen Park, which I don't know that we've had a lot of contact with.
Well, I assume that if we recommend an alternative, we recommend that the council and the staff do more work intensely with the people in the local area to answer these questions, right? Sorry, Carrie.
Yeah.
Chair, did you want to invite the no people to respond to their votes?
No, I mean, I think we all talked about it. Keith was pretty clear. I'm in the same place where Keith is, and I think Phil also, unless anybody wants to say anything else, Keith or Phil.
I didn't quite understand your vote, but if you don't, if
my vote, yeah, I'm kind of where Keith is. I mean, I'm sure I'm happy to elaborate on my own position. So I'm concerned about the folks in Southgate who would feel locked out and separated, and I'm not comfortable with the mitigations. I can get more comfortable with the closure by doing some of the things that I mentioned in the beginning about looking at potentially building the bike ped crossing potentially at Seal, and then being able to test the closure to make sure we have the right car mitigations that are going to be necessary, because I have the similar concerns to what Phil has about this is a 2030 traffic study, but we're looking at 2040 Caltrain numbers. And to some extent, the debate between In-Young and Phil about what the future looks like of, telecommuting or not, or what have you, I don't understand any of those things. And so I'd be interested in understanding that piece. I also feel like there's...
Could I interrupt? We've already voted on this. What are we doing?
Carrie asked for me to speak to
No, but I think that was an inappropriate question, with all respect to Carrie.
Okay. All right. Well,
I was trying to understand where we were going, because the chair was directing us to discuss mitigations, and I just wanted a little bit of clarity on that, but I appreciate your feedback.
Okay, no worries. So yeah, that's where I was. We can talk more offline if you want. Okay, so my suggestion would be I would like to add that potential mitigation or potential extra area of study to the possibility of a closure, along with the investigation of the Seal bike path for the reasons that I stated earlier.
Yeah, I would like to. Phil asked me a while back what I wanted, so when you get a chance, I can.
Yeah, go for it.
I would love to see, if there exist, more detailed schematics and profiles for the Churchill bike crossing options,
Mm-hmm.
it would help, because we had a long debate about what the grades were and how wide they were. And I know Ripon has some data, but if there's something you can send us that we already have, that would be helpful.
I tell you, we'll bring whatever we can get and whatever exists at this point. But I was just going to say that something that we won't be able to do is provide a feasibility study on whether the sealed tunnel is ready or can be done by next week. So I just want to make sure that's well known. I mean, I think that's going to take a lot of work.
And I'm going to ask for 2 more pieces of information, sir. If I could, and then I'll stop. I'm sorry, Ann Young. Would it be possible also to find out the dimensions of the California Avenue bike tunnel? And for extra credit, the East Palo Alto bike bridge.
So I've got Homer and California Avenue on our list, and I'll see about the Palo Alto as well. I'm not sure if we can.
Otherwise, I can lend you a tape measure.
I actually found the profile of the East Palo Alto bike bridge on their website, but I could not read, the image was too small and I couldn't read the numbers. So yes, I might go out there with a tape measure. That's a good idea. Other than that, I'm done. Thank you.
Okay. In Young, did you have something to say? And then I see Tony and Dave.
Yeah, so I just want to, I'm sorry, but to the underpass, right? I mean, I would like that work too, because I want to make, I want to go across, and then I want to support other neighbors that wants to, don't want to be in an island. I would like to support that. However,
sorry, In Young, can I just clarify? Do you mean the bike underpass for the closure, or are you talking about the partial underpass?
Partial underpass, right?
Okay.
But however, one of the reasons we're suggesting for the closure is because of the price and the constructionability and also safety and all that. And even if we make this underpass really beautiful, I mean, partial underpass that is shrinking down and workable, but still those, the cost and the construction and the safety is just, the pedestrian bike safety is still there. So I'm just a little reluctant. So those problem doesn't go away. I mean, maybe, I don't know, maybe it goes away, but I just cannot think of it, those, that solves the problem.
So we just basically, the vote basically showed that 6-3, there's a preference in the group for closure. So right now we're basically discussing is what additional mitigations besides the baseline mitigations for closure would the group be interested in putting forth?
Right.
And then at some point we'll come back to the partial underpass and still flesh that out, so that if the council were to disagree with us and choose that, we could give them as many suggestions we can on how to make it better. So we'll come back to that.
Okay. All right. Sorry.
Yeah. No, it's okay. Dave, your hand is up. Oh, you're muted.
First, sorry about that. First, a piece of information for Phil and staff. I'd love to get the dimensions of what AECom had delivered, just so we're all clear on what we're seeing in the renderings. When I think back to the rendering of looking down the bike path that you cross Alma first, and then you turn right, going down under the tracks, that looked to be a lot wider than anything that 11 feet was. So I'd love to figure out, what that slope and that width would be. And then to your point, Nadia, about what additional mitigations, I'd love to see, if possible, if we could look at traffic inducement on Churchill, and also we might also toss in Embarcadero and Oregon Expressway. So taking a look at that would be great.
Okay, so that's traffic inducement at Churchill, Embarcadero, and Oregon.
Yes.
And then bike path at Seal, and then I said the Park Boulevard thing. Okay, so right now we've got 5 potential suggestions. Yes, Tony.
So just like you were suggesting on the mitigation side to add a tunnel at Seal, I would also like to ask if we can do a Homer-like underpass at Churchill, but correcting some of the defects on Homer.
Well, we can't do that unless we raise the tracks, remember?
Yeah, but that could be a mitigation. Or you do, or there may be room to do it. But I'm asking if we can do a Homer-like.
No, there's no, so what the consultant said the last time was in order to be able to do the Homer, the reason Homer is how it is because the tracks are raised there. In order to raise the tracks, we'd have to create shoe fly tracks. And currently we wouldn't have any shoe fly tracks as part of closure. So that would really change the cost and all of the kind of construction elements. Right?
Yes, it would change that.
Yeah, I don't.
Or you could look at Homer deeper. It's about 2 feet higher right now, and Homer is about 5 feet higher.
But either way, it has to be lifted. In order to lift, you have to do a shoe fly.
Oh, you cannot go under this. So how do you do that tunnel? How do you do the bike tunnel if you don't?
So that's if you don't know, I'm not going to know. Well, I guess it's a question. Because Keith, you had a similar thought at some point, which was there are ways to kind of jack up the tracks. Like if it's a foot or two, you can do that without necessarily needing shoe fly. But I think there's a really big difference.
I was speaking because that's what Tony told me. So
yeah, but I just want to say, I think there's a really big difference between being able to do that on conventional rail and being able to do that once Caltrain has put in poles and wires and electrified. Then it becomes a different thing because there's a fiber optic cable under the train right away. And you've got to deal with all of those things. So if it was just like a regular track out like where freight runs, I've seen that you can lift it, but I'm not sure that that's a thing when you've already got poles and wires.
Yeah, Nadia, beyond that, you're probably talking about not just one weekend service interruptions like with box jacking, but multiple weeks. And the alternative, by the way, you can't do that if you do what's called single tracking.
Right.
But that's complete source of Caltrain services. I don't think they'll go for that.
I see Philip has reappeared.
Yeah, I was just going to say similar. I mean, similar to what Phil said, this would be completely up to Caltrain, but I think that it would be unlikely that they would be interested in doing that on an active railway. So I think that.
Nadia, sorry, it's the idea of doing a Homer-like tunnel is maybe possible because we don't have now a right turn lane from Alma South to Embarcadero to Churchill West. We don't have a left turn lane. So there may be ability to move the road a little bit to get a little bit more comfortable bike path that's out in the open and easy to see and so on. So
I think what I'm hearing you say is really, Tony, what you would like to do as part of the mitigations. So I think what you're talking about is more in the bucket of bike improvements that I think is part of what we're tabling for the next time. So I think if right now what I'm trying to focus on is some kind of traffic or road mitigation as a result of closing off to cars that might go above and beyond what the baseline is that Hexagon has suggested. So that's what I'm working on now. But so save your thing for when we try to make the bike thing better. I think that's where that probably fits better. Carrie, your hand is up.
Thank you. I agree with all the items that have been brought up for discussion. One thing I'd like to add is the Lincoln High Emerson at Embarcadero Kingsley area. It's still it's very dangerous. We're going to be putting more traffic through those areas, and I just want to take a closer look at those mitigations to make sure that we address all the safety issues there.
I totally agree. I think that maybe the best way to kind of capture that is that there has to be a specific, the bike ped plan there has to be reviewed because there was like an existing plan and now what these mitigations propose, and those two don't seem to jive.
And there are some maybe non-traditional behaviors, non-expected behaviors, non-planned behaviors that are happening at those intersections regarding school pickup and drop off. that we need to find a better solution for. And maybe instead of not planning for it, we should plan for it so we have a better, safer solution.
Yeah, I actually had a thought in that area. We were surprised to learn a long time back that parents are stopping in various unsafe places in sort of the Embarcadero Alma complex to drop their kids off for Pali. I wonder if the recommendation is to close Churchill, that there's some way to have a drop off on that side of the tracks near the Churchill undercrossing. I have no idea if there's room for that, if it infringes on Caltrain right away. I don't know. But, you know, imagine a safe place where people could drop their kids off without having to cross the tracks. That might be I have no idea if that's feasible, but that might keep people from doing those dangerous things. If not, it needs to be designed into the Embarcadero mitigations, like Carrie's saying.
Okay, so maybe we want to put in there something about looking at unauthorized or unsupported pickup and drop off locations and mitigating that appropriately.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Baking that into the design. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
Along those same lines, right now, when the kids are dropped off, they go on the Embarcadero sidewalk towards Town and Country, and they scamper up that side wall. It's just dirt. and they really should put some type of stairs there. It's going to be much safer and much more orderly to go up there instead of having them cross landscaping.
Exactly right. Yeah.
Do we think that that's captured in having them relook at the bike ped plan for the Emerson High Embarcadero area?
No, this is on the west side of the tracks.
Mm-hmm.
As you go from the Embarcadero sidewalk up to Town and Country. There's a landscaping strip that's, 20 feet tall or whatever, and they just scamper up the side of that. And
instead of walking up the sidewalk, really?
Yeah, because if you walk up the sidewalk, you have to go all the way down and then backtrack. If you just go up the landscaping, you can save a lot of walking.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Which is the same issue as I brought up about the distance of the various bike tunnels.
Yeah.
from
Churchill.
It's exactly the same issue.
Yeah, I mean, when we looked at the mitigation plans long ago, that's certainly one consideration. The other is, I know we talked about a pedestrian overcrossing over in Embarcadero to get the kids over to the Town and Country side, but they're going to cross at the light if it's shorter. So we just, and yeah, all that stuff. And again, I hope that after this process is concluded, and it will conclude someday, that the people who are, the Town and Country people and the Pali people and the Board of Ed will all get together and make some of these detailed discussions based on data and local knowledge and not just what we say.
Mm-hmm. Okay, is there anything, so another thing that just occurred to me is with a closure, you currently have the bike, oh, actually, no, it's at Churchill, never mind. Okay, so it sounds like what might be, I know we're all sick of thinking about this, especially once a week, we're already sick of thinking about this, but maybe to speed up the next meeting, if people could come with their kind of list of, oh, I went back and looked and I just remembered that I had these other thoughts about a closure and or about a partial underpass, then that would really speed up our work next week. And we could kind of pull those all together by just calling them out kind of popcorn style and then getting a big list going. So if that's something that you guys can do in all your copious amounts of spare time that you want to dedicate to XCAP, that would I think be helpful. Because otherwise we're sort of stuck going through this, okay, what else can we do thing? But I mean, I think, we've made progress, but I kind of have to wrap my head around, especially for me, I was not in a place where closure was my preference. So I really have to kind of think now, okay, bending my thought that way, what other things would I be comfortable with for mitigations? Did you guys have any other thoughts in terms of phasing a closure? That is something that we would want to put some language around.
Really liked your proposal, Nadia.
On the seal, having a bike ped thing built first.
And not only that, and I know that money is an issue, but the amount of money we're talking about for things like that, I think is more in like the human scale. So when this whole thing started, and the idea was, for $2 billion, we'll build a tunnel, various people in town said, well, why don't we get one of our local rich people to buy it for us?
Right.
And well, no, I mean, that doesn't make any sense. But if we're
Naming
talking
rights, naming
Yeah.
rights.
But if we're talking about a tunnel that helps your kids get to school more safely, that costs a more reasonable amount of money, maybe there's someone in the community who would be interested in
The
helping.
Greg Braille underpass. I can see it now.
I know I'm not one of those people.
Well, Greg, you don't. Maybe you don't have the money, and I'll admit I certainly don't. But a certain MZ might.
I could come in and paint a railing or something. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Philip, you came on. Did you have something?
No, I was just going to say, I think that, one thing that I agree with the phasing, and I think that, we would want to do it in a phased approach where we get things ready. Like if the closure was the option, the bike ped things happen before the closure. So it's not, we're trying to react afterwards. And like all of a sudden, kids don't have a way to get to school and cyclists don't have a way to get to Stanford and some of the different things. But I would caution to not separate those into two different things, because if we don't find the Gregory Braille tunnel or some other person to donate a tunnel to us, we want it to be considered as one project.
Right. Yeah.
For funding purposes. So we can seek funding for the project, even if that's the first phase, which I think, from a planning perspective makes sense.
I did want to capture something that sort of Tony had said earlier with regard to the viaduct, but I do think is something that policymakers who might be looking at this, many years from now might want to consider, is that another way to mitigate the pressure that builds on Embarcadero and Embarcadero at El Camino is the answer of what happens downtown Palo Alto Avenue. And so, we've talked about the fact that we're not really looking at that. But as you guys heard in the very early years of CAP, if there's a viaduct downtown, that would significantly change the traffic patterns, and that could potentially be thought of as a way to help mitigate some of the pressure that gets put on Embarcadero as a result of closure. So I think in terms of things that they might want to think about, that I'll put it on the list of things to think about, is the connection between a Palo Alto Avenue design and how it might be used to mitigate traffic, specifically at Embarcadero and El Camino.
And I will say there are a lot fewer people who live right on Alma and Embarcadero, so we might have more flexibility there, and it will have less of an impact on people's homes.
So what about, one of the things I was stuck on was, oh, sorry, Dave, I see your hand up.
First, I just want to say I like the ring of Greg Braille underpass.
It's hashtag Greg Braille underpass.
Yeah, that's the second vote for that. Maybe we can sell tiles. We can sponsor
it
tiles.
It can be like an underpass for cats. I could probably afford that. But,
we'll just stick a tunnel, like a
wildlife
steel
crossing.
pipe down there. Yeah, the badgers that go across. Geez, I forgot my thought. Oh yeah, first, something that we had talked about a long time ago that would be great to put in there, and it may be a phasing thing, is moving the entrance to Town and Country. It's been tossed around, but I'd love to just bring that up and make sure that isn't lost, because anything we can do to remove those multiple lights that are sitting in that little bit of street from Alma to El Camino would be helpful.
So can you say more about what you mean by that? Did you mean the concept of having them come in through the Palo Alto Medical Foundation street, that like where the car wash
Yeah,
is?
it could be over there. Could be, there's another exit on the other side on El Camino. Maybe it's there. What's that other road? There's another road that's on the edge of the Town and Country. That's
the one with the car wash and the Opportunity
Yeah.
Center. Or
Yeah, so maybe something over there. That could, I didn't want to lose that. Also wanted to point out that the bike ped underpass that goes across first at a light could also be built beforehand. So we could do that, have something go underneath and still close later. So I just wanted to make sure that was in there.
Yeah, I think all of the bike ped mitigations would have to be built first before any closure. I think.
Well, okay.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Then the other thing I wanted to say was potentially as a staging thing, the Embarcadero mitigations might want to be built first before closing, because if we can solve these equity issues, all these other issues that people have brought up, then it would improve that intersection no matter what. And that should be there no matter what happens to any of the other intersections.
Yeah, I just want to speak to that. And my understanding is that the mitigations need to be built, finished before the closure can occur. Otherwise, we have failure other places. So,
yeah.
So that's a done deal anyway. So
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, is there anything anybody else has? All right. Okay, so Philip and Ripon, I just wanted to make sure, so you guys are clear, whatever measurements you can give us. Honestly, it could be as easy as stopping the video at some point and just drawing a line and showing us this is 10 feet wide, this is 8 feet wide, this is this much % grade. I'd be fine with that, or a cocktail napkin at this point, but I think understanding what those renderings are would be great.
yeah, we'll have something for you on that.
Okay. And then, yeah, anybody who wants to Google and or go to the CalAV tunnel and start measuring stuff with their iPhone or whatever, that would be great too.
So I think I just want to reiterate that going to the CalAV tunnel and assuming that that's something that we would find acceptable, it's not. It's
no,
actually,
yeah, I think the point is to show that it's not what we thought.
Well,
it's
the east, yeah, the
something
east,
that we're trying to mitigate. Actually, we're trying to fix the issues there and trying to deal with them. And actually, some of my staff had hosted a session where they went out there and tried to troubleshoot it. It's very problematic. It's really not. It's not something we would. It's certainly not something we would build today.
Isn't it on the? It's on the 2012 bicycle plan, and actually, there's money specifically allocated from Measure A from year 2000, I think, where there's money set aside for the improvements of the CalAV tunnel.
Possibly.
There are. I found it. Whether there's any money left in Measure A is a whole other thing, but.
I mean, the thing about CalAV is you have room there. You could actually make it wider.
Yes.
That's one of the bad things about all these other places like Seal and Churchill is that you just can't make it as wide as you want, because otherwise you cut off the street.
Yeah, and by the way, many people may not remember this, but there used to be a grade crossing at CalAV many years ago.
Well, I don't remember it, but I know it's true.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Bad word choice. I meant we're aware of. Thank you. I don't remember it either.
And here's a question for the group. So I live in Old Palo Alto, and a lot of people use the Churchill light to be not just to go across, but also to make unsignalized left turns. If we close and you now can no longer go across, is Churchill still the right spot to have the signal, or would it be better at a place like Northern California? Because you do have so many people coming out of that CalAV tunnel, and it just helps to be able to, you've got people that pick up speed along that point. And whether that's something that we want to have the council think about if they're looking at, improvements around that area. Is there anybody who has a strong feeling who understands the neighborhood? Yeah, Dave?
Just one thought is, if we do the option of the cross for the bike and heads to go across first and then go down, we'll still need a light. However, we could just make the light for bike and ped, right? It could just be green for traffic until someone comes over and presses a crossing button, right? So I guess that's possible. And then we could move the vehicle light somewhere else if it made sense.
Okay, I'll hold that then until the bike ped conversation, because I think that's a more appropriate place.
And I'm going to harp one more time on the East Palo Alto crossing, because it is brand new, so it is ADA compliant.
Is this
it's pretty long?
Where is it exactly? I'm not
It
familiar
goes
with it.
from the part of East Palo Alto is on the other side of Newell, right across to Home Depot.
Oh, it's the new Newell.
Yes.
Bridge?
It goes
No.
It goes from Home Depot in East Palo Alto, makes a little circle, goes over 101, and lands in East Palo Alto, not far from the 7-Eleven, and then it's about 2 blocks from there onto Newell Street and Edgewood Drive. And it's a pretty long way up, and it's relatively steep, but it kind of goes up and it kind of goes like this, which I think is ADA compliant. So if someone wants to know what an ADA compliant crossing might feel like to cross on a bike, there's a test. It's also extremely wide.
Yeah, and I think Philip, what would be useful is, or Ripon, is to understand if the AECOM drawings are at 8%, and let's say we thought 5% is more appropriate because we have little kids on bikes, can you give us a sense of, if you change the grade, this is how much further back the entrance, especially on the, I'm thinking about the Churchill in the middle of the street, like how much further back onto Emerson would that need to be? Go closer the opposite direction, understanding what that math turns out to be.
Will do.
Great, awesome. All right, guys, great job sitting still for this many hours and getting through this stuff. I will attempt to write a summary of the suggested additional mitigations that we've talked about. And if I could ask each of you to either use Carrie's matrix or use your own ability to flesh out pros and cons of the alternatives, that would help in writing the rest of the section of the report. We will still be discussing, well, I have to get with staff to see how fast we could get answers on the bike ped stuff, to see whether we'll have Churchill on the docket again for next week, or whether we take a break and switch to Meadow Charleston and then come back as we get information. I'll work that out with staff. It's kind of nice to keep the cadence and keep going because it keeps us somewhat focused. But if they can't get stuff fast enough to us, then I need to give staff more time. So those will be the things that I'm looking for. Anybody